meeting of the City of Eugene Budget Committee to order on May 17th at 5:32 p.m. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to start by acknowledging how much of a privilege it is to be here, and that not everyone in our community has the same opportunity to participate in this process that those of us who are here have. So I hope throughout all of our deliberations, we will always keep in mind who isn't in the room as well as who is. And keep in mind also that sometimes the people who will be most affected by the decisions we make on this committee are the people, in many cases, with the least opportunity to be a part of this process. So with that, again, thank you everyone for being here. And we're going to start off with approval of minutes, which those were minutes for the May 10th meeting were sent out and included in the packet. Did anyone have any recommended changes to those? Zach?
It's not in the minutes, but in the questions responses, there's a number of questions attributed to Councilor Lillard Keating that I had actually sent in by email. I don't know if it needs to get cleaned up, but just thought I'd mention it.
All right, noted. In that case, a note to the general public, if you're here hoping to give comment and you haven't already raised your virtual hand, go ahead and do so. I'll give another detail on that after we vote. With that mentioned, do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Moved by Eliza.
Second.
And I hear a second from Councilor Clark. All in favor, please, if you're able to, turn your cameras on for easier counting and raise your hand. I'm seeing 10 in favor. Did I have any opposed? Any abstentions? I have that carrying by a 10-0 vote. I will now give another note about our upcoming public comment period, and then I'll give a little detail of how the meeting will go overall tonight. So first of all, for public comment, this is going to be a public comment period on the 2023-25 proposed biennial budget, and it's for anyone wishing to make comment on that topic. So if you would like to speak, public comment will be beginning in 5 minutes at 5:40 p.m. We will be taking speakers until then, so please, before 5:40, go ahead and virtually raise your hand, or if you're joining by phone, you can press *9. After 5:40, when we begin the process, the period to jump into the queue will end, and the meeting moderator will at that time be unraising or disallowing any further requests. We will have 2.5 minutes for each person to speak, and we have a total of 60 minutes allotted for the public comment time. And so that's where we are, and I'm going to give people those additional 5 minutes to get signed in and set up and get their hands raised if they want to talk. After public comment tonight, we're going to be hearing 3 staff presentations first on the fire engine and squad proposal that's in this budget, then a presentation on climate recovery work, and a presentation on urban renewal and the increase to the frozen base that is proposed in this budget. So we will have those 3 presentations informationally for the committee and for the public as well. That'll be followed by a break. We will then return for budget committee discussion. That will be our opportunity to ask questions either about the presentations that we heard tonight or to have any open discussion we want to have about the proposed budget. Reminder, we won't be doing any motions tonight. We will be holding all motions for our meeting next week on the 24th. But it will be a great opportunity tonight to let people know what motions you're planning. There's a lot of upside to that. For one, it prevents 4 different people from trying to make motions on the same topic. It allows you to give people opportunities to think about what you're going to be moving to do. If you have anything in mind, it gives you opportunities to let people know ahead of time what sort of offsets you're looking for, how you plan to pay for what it is that you want to add. Gives you opportunities to coordinate with staff and make sure your motions work. So please, the more we can talk tonight about any motions that anyone is planning to make, I think the smoother everything is going to go for all of us next week. I'm seeing that we have enough people in public comment. Would it work if I go ahead and give the spiel and get us started on our initial speakers, but we keep the sign up open for those 3 more minutes? Liz?
Sorry, it takes me a sec to come off mute. Yes, I think that would be fine.
Okay, so in that case, I'll go ahead and read my little paragraph and we'll start up with public comment. The meeting moderator is going to be announcing the next 2 speakers at a time. And when it is your turn to speak, your name will be announced and you'll be promoted to panelist. Please preface your statement with your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. We will be offering you 2.5 minutes to comment. There will be a timer on the screen if you're able to see it. The yellow light should go on when you have 30 seconds remaining. When your time concludes, we will mute your microphone and you'll be demoted back to attendee, and we'll move on to the next speaker. If you've connected to the meeting via phone and don't have the benefit of seeing the timer, just be aware that your microphone will be muted at that 2.5 minute mark. And we will keep signups open till 5:40 if there's any last minute person who wants to raise their hand, but I think we can go ahead and start comment. Liz, take it away.
Hi,
So
Ty and Budget.
actually, there you go.
Hey, Ty and Budget Committee. This is Maurizio. I'll be facilitating our public comment tonight.
Maurizio, take it away.
So first up, we have L851, followed by Zach Harney. L851, you have been promoted to panelist. You should be able to unmute yourself and share your video.
Hello, I updated my name there. It's Chris Seward. Hi, my name is Chris Seward. I'm the president of Lane Professional Firefighters. I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity today to address you all. I'm here to draw attention to something that we believe should concern all of us. Our concern lies with the proposed replacement of our fire engine with a squad that Chief Caven will be presenting later this evening. This decision, despite its cost effectiveness, will significantly impact our community's safety and emergency response capabilities. Removing an engine from an already strained system will have a ripple effect throughout the entire community, not only ours, but also Springfield. The primary consequence of this decision will increase response times. Every aspect of our service focuses on rapid emergency response. Removing an engine will force adjacent engines to cover the depleted areas creating a cascade effect that will require engines from both the Eugene and Springfield communities to respond outside their normal response area to cover this. This will decrease unit reliability and increase response times. Fire demands immediate action and prompt response. Fire engines are designed to carry personnel, water, and equipment to effective fire control. However, reducing an engine and relying on a squad will jeopardize our ability to fight fires promptly in specific areas of the community. This delay increases the potential for significant property damage, loss of life, and irreversible consequences. Our community is growing, with new residential and commercial developments constantly emerging. This expansion brings an increased demand for emergency services. Reducing the number of fire engines fails to adapt to our evolving needs and endangers the lives and well-being of our community members. Moreover, if an engine is cut now and funding is later reallocated to restaff, it would entail a time-consuming process of hiring an academy and then a year-long training process to fully restore that engine. We must prioritize the safety in our community by ensuring our emergency response capabilities align with the expanding demand. Squads, while suitable for certain tasks and lower acuity calls, lack the capacity and capabilities of engines for fire suppression. Prioritizing costs savings over community safety increases the vulnerability for our neighborhoods to devastating fires and emergencies beyond the squad scope. I urge the committee to reconsider the proposed cuts and please prioritize the protection of lives, properties, and the overall well-being of our community. Thank you all for your attention and dedication to our community safety.
Thank you. Next up, we have Zach Harney, followed by Brenda Kamanui. Zach, you have been promoted to panelist. You should be able to speak now and unmute and show your video.
All right, my name is Zach Harney. I am the vice president for Local 851. So good evening, city leaders, budget committee, and city council members. As I said, my name is Zach Harney, and I'm the vice president for the Lane Professional Firefighters Association. I'm speaking on behalf of the 300 plus members that we represent and voicing our strong opposition against decreasing response resources for Eugene Springfield Fire Department. As many departments around the state look to add staffing and resources, the city is asking our department to decrease resources. On a daily basis, our resources across both cities are depleted and response times become delayed. On Friday, May 12th, just 5 days ago, we had to ask for resources from South Lane Fire and Lane Fire Authority due to call volume exhausting all available resources in the cities of Eugene and Springfield. On multiple occasions, there were engine companies performing extended patient care on scene due to no available ambulances to transport these patients to the hospital. Unfortunately, this is not an anomaly, but rather a daily occurrence. As the city continues to rapidly grow upward and outward, we should be discussing the addition of resources and personnel rather than the reduction of resources and full-time firefighter spots. Community members of wards 1, 2, 6, 7, and 8, I want you to ask yourself a question. If mine, my neighbors, or my family member's house is on fire, do I want to see a fire engine show up or do I want to see a pickup truck show up? When the fire department is asked to reduce resources, the city is asking us to make decisions that go against our mission statement. Our mission is to serve our community by protecting life and preserving property. In less than 30 seconds, a small flame can turn into a major fire. And in less than a few minutes, a fire can become out of control. These neighborhoods affected by the reduction of a fire engine will see response times increase to over 5 minutes for the first arriving fire engine. This increased response time could be the difference of a life and death situation, and it will undoubtedly affect the severity and damage caused to a community member's home and property. I kindly ask that you all reconsider the reduction of resources to Eugene Springfield Fire Department. Right now, more than ever, our members need to know that the city stands behind us and supports the work that we do within our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Brenda Kamanui, followed by Sasha Elliott. Brenda, I have promoted you to panelist. You should be able to unmute yourself and share your video now. Brenda, are you there? I no longer see Brenda. Oh. Brenda, are you there?
I'm here, but I can't find myself.
Okay, we can hear you now. You are
You
unmuted.
can?
And now
Good.
we see your video. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
You're ready.
I'm sorry to be so slow. Brenda Kamei-Inui, Eugene, Ward 2. While it shouldn't be this way in modern American society, the public library serves as one of the safest, most secure, and most sane social service hotspots for the unhoused or anyone who is a wanderer. Every time I'm inside the library, I witness the staff treat the unhoused with extraordinary respect and care so that all patrons are allowed a calm and safe library visit. Reading proficiency is a very big issue in Oregon and even in local schools. The state has just passed a literacy bill that will afford schools extra help with coaches and even using evidence-based curriculum. This is the perfect time for the library to initiate the early literacy librarian at the Bethel branch, and also the right time to offer a variety of supports at every branch for emerging readers. The library is not only a boon to downtown health and economy, it also demonstrates equity for all, and no place does it better. San Francisco has the Golden Gate Bridge, Paris has the Eiffel Tower, Portland has Portlandia, and Eugene has the beautiful, accessible, and serviceable Eugene Public Library. Let's not remove the supports from an extraordinary service that is open to everyone, no matter age, gender, race, or reading ability. Please minimize budget cuts to the library as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sasha Elliott, followed by Emily Haybrun. And after Sasha, we will share a list on the screen so folks can see where they are in random order. Sasha, I have promoted you to panelist. You should be able to unmute and share your screen.
Hello, and thank you. I'm Sasha Elliott, a resident of Ward 1 and the Director of Operations at Green Hill Humane Society. I'd like to shed light on a crucial aspect of the city's animal welfare program that often goes unnoticed. While many have expressed concerns about the proposed budget cuts, I'd like to share how animal shelters like Green Hill play a vital role in protecting animal safety and public safety. Beyond the commonly known tasks of picking up stray animals and investigating cases of abuse and neglect, the city's animal welfare program also works to safeguard our community from potential dangers posed by animals. It's not a topic that receives much attention, and that's because when the system is functioning effectively, we don't make headlines. However, when it fails, the consequences can be devastating. When the system is working well, it means that our community maintains a state of vigilance. It means having well-trained animal welfare professionals who are equipped to handle potentially dangerous situations. And it means having a safe and secure shelter where animals with aggressive behaviors can be cared for while difficult decisions are made and additional precautions are put into place to ensure they pose no threat to others. For the last 11 years, through a contract with Green Hill, Eugene police officers have had a safe and secure shelter to bring dangerous animals 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. Our recently constructed animal care and veterinary medical buildings, made possible entirely through generous donations, were designed specifically to prioritize safety while offering a comfortable environment for animals during their confinement. Animals brought by officers may be on a mandatory 10-day bite quarantine. They may be classified as potentially dangerous by the court system or aggressing people or other animals. Without proper funding, this may be eliminated on July 1st. While these animals are in our care, only trained Green Hill staff, often working in pairs for safety, provide daily feeding, care, and enrichment. You can imagine the immense risk this poses to our staff, both physically and emotionally, as well as the risk to other animals in our care. We take on this responsibility because it's an essential part of our contracted work and a significant contribution towards keeping our community safe. Green Hill's work, in partnership with the city, is a key component to our collective well-being. It is imperative that we ensure adequate funding for our animal welfare programs. Anything less will compromise the safety of both animals and people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, my colleague Carrie will share her screen. So as soon as we get that up, folks will be able to see where they are in order. So next up, we have Emily Heilbrunn, followed by Crystal E. I am currently promoting Emily. Emily, you have been promoted to panelist. You should be able to unmute and share your video.
Hello, my name is Emily Heilbrunn. I live in Eugene, Ward 1, and I'm a regular library user, checking out books and occasionally attending events. Thank you for your service on the Budget Committee and for the opportunity to testify this evening. I'm here to urge you not to cut the library's funding. The library does an incredible job of providing an extensive range of services to the citizens of Eugene. People can check out books, attend readings and other events, take their children to story time, spend time in the library when their homes are too hot or too cold, and more. The library brings people to downtown. It reduces barriers, allowing people to access computers to search for jobs, to apply for government services, and to use the internet in other ways. The proposed cuts would mean eliminating over 9 FTE staff, a very significant portion of the current staffing level. I encourage you to avoid this negative impact on the important services the library provides and to add funding for an early literacy librarian at the Bethel branch. The Eugene Library is an incredible investment. Please do not reduce its budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Crystal E, followed by Mary Riley. Crystal, I have promoted you to panelist. You should be able to unmute and share your video.
Hello, my name is Crystal Elms. I'm a citizen of Eugene, Ward 2, and I'm here to speak about the library and how important of a resource it is. My son Brendan would like to share his thoughts for a moment.
So I think the library is very important. I really like how many books there are. We should keep the library going.
I would like to echo that, and also all the other thoughts that have been shared tonight about how important of a resource they are, and also to remind the committee that they don't have any way to make up any shortfalls. They don't have any income, and it's just such an important resource that I'd like to keep them around and urge you to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mary Riley, followed by Gretchen Miller. Mary, you have been promoted to panelist, and you should be able to unmute and share your video.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. Thanks for your time, first and foremost. I'm Mary Riley. I live in an unincorporated area of Eugene off River Road, and I am a member of the Green Hill Humane Society Board of Directors. I'm here to speak specifically about the importance of Green Hill's crisis impound services for the city of Eugene. This is the sheltering of animals in situations where people are in crisis. Last year, Green Hill took in 72 dogs and 42 cats directly from City of Eugene officers and personnel in situations in which the humans were in crisis. They were all times when an unhoused owner lost their shelter or was being threatened with eviction or was taken to the hospital or jail, leaving their pet with no other sheltering option. Through the city's current contract with Green Hill, these animals are temporarily housed until either their owner is available to care for them or they're released for adoption. I work with unhoused youth every week as a volunteer at Hosea Youth Services, and I volunteer at the Egan Warming Center youth site whenever possible. I see firsthand how companion animals become a lifeline for many people who are unhoused. In a world where safety and comfort can be scarce, pets offer a sense of security and solace. They can be nurtured and cared for, and they reciprocate that with unwavering affection and loyalty. The connection with another living being serves as a reminder of one's humanity and brings a sense of purpose and responsibility. In a situation where hope may be in short supply, the presence of a beloved pet can be a powerful motivating force, encouraging individuals to persevere and find strength in the midst of adversity. For unhoused youth, companion animals are especially important. Beyond the immediate emotional support, they can serve as a source of stability and routine. Their responsibility helps individuals maintain a sense of self-worth, dignity, and pride. Additionally, pets facilitate social connections. While unhoused individuals may face isolation and marginalization, their pets often become a conversation starter and an avenue for building relationships with others. I know you have a difficult task ahead of you, and I appreciate so much that you're willing to make time to hear from members of the community tonight. The Animal Services Program is currently a vital part of the unhoused initiatives that the city is undertaking. I hope you'll work together to find a way that allows Eugene to be a compassionate and inclusive community for all. Thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Gretchen Miller, followed by Cecilia Hagan. Gretchen, you have been promoted to panelist and should be able to unmute and share your video.
I think I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, I can't see me, but there we go. I assume I'm here somewhere. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. You couldn't get me on something like this budget committee on a bet. It's a terrible job. So I'm really glad you're willing to do it. I am a resident of Ward 1, and I can say for what it's worth, I've been a resident of Ward 1 for longer than some of you have been alive, as a matter of fact. It's a great area. I'm here for the library. I'm always here for the library. I could second or third what has already been said. I won't bore you with that. Let me just say Bethel really needs the youth literacy outreach program. $125 that they need. I won't bore you with statistics that I know you're familiar with, except to say that the Oregon Department of Education in 2022 found that 24% of incoming fourth graders in the Bethel School District were reading at what they called a proficient level, 24%. We're losing a generation here, and we won't be the city that we have been and that we want to be if we don't have literate citizens. It just won't happen. The reduction in services at the downtown library are equally concerning. It's been pointed out the downtown library is a cooling center and a warming center and a public bathroom, and all of that is hard to keep going, in addition to being a really welcoming place where people can go and can learn. So look for jobs, learn skills for new jobs, learn about new interests, read silly things, and kick back and relax. All the services are absolutely endless, as I think you know. It's a terrible job you're doing. I appreciate that you are willing to do it and give it all of your best effort. And I do hope that whatever you decide to do, that you'll just boost the library a little bit more, because it's awfully important. Literacy really is equity, and literacy really is our future as a democratic society. Thank you again.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to do another screen share to show the remainder of the list. We'll pause here for a moment. So next up, we have Cecilia Hagan, followed by Mandy Hazen. Cecilia, you have been promoted to panelist. You should be able to unmute and share your screen.
Hello, I'm trying to get my picture off of that. I don't know if it's going to work.
We can hear you.
Let's start my video. Okay, I'll just start. My name is Cecilia Hagan. I live in Ward 2. And I appreciate this chance to speak to the Budget Committee and other members of Eugene City staff on behalf of the library. I've lived in Eugene for 50 years. When my kids were small, we went to the library on 13th, just about every week. And sometimes there was even a bus library that would come to the Whitaker School down the street from where we lived. Now I have 4 grandchildren, and the younger 2 go to the library pretty much every week. The children's section of the downtown library is always buzzing with activity and families and kids playing with stacking toys and games and looking at the books. And I really feel the budget for the library should be cut as little as possible. The kids need so many new materials. There's always great new things that help kids in the ways they need to be helped now. I also volunteer in the public schools in 2nd grade, and I see so many kids are struggling, and the library offers just the kind of things that they need. Also, if you go to the library a few minutes before it opens, you're waiting in the lobby with a crowd of people waiting to go in to use the bathrooms, to get to the computers that they've signed up for. It's, the old library before they built the new one was so crowded, and I'm finding the new library is almost as crowded at this point already. It's just a valuable resource to so many in our community. It truly is open for everyone. And I used to be on the budget committee, the Community Development Background Housing Committee, to help advise. And so I know how hard it is to deny one aspect of area need in terms of another, but I feel that the library is essential for just everyone, especially people that have no other way to get to the materials and the resources that the library offers. So I urge you to cut as little as possible in your budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Mandy Hazen. Mandy, you have been promoted to panelist. You should be able to unmute and share your video.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mandy Hazen from Eugene, Ward 4. I'm speaking to you today as the Eugene Public Library Foundation board member, as a frequent library user, as someone working in social services, and as a mother of a child who has benefited greatly from the library services. In mid-March of 2020, when many were lining up at Costco, we were at the library stocking up for both his sanity and mine. When I grew up in kindergarten, my son dressed up as president, and when asked about his goals as president, he stated, candy for kids whenever they want it, and making sure libraries had enough money to help everyone and be open all the time. He's going to need your help with that last goal, as at the age of 10, he is not quite ready to run for president, though he would say otherwise. He needs your help in making sure that our community can continue to receive the amazing benefits from the library, which in my social services career, I have seen actually save lives. The library provides opportunities for groups to come together and build community during a time where that is needed more than ever. As we see the effects of climate change, it is also a place of respite from extreme temperatures and air quality issues. Reducing our library's resources means you're reducing our community's access to information, independence, and safety. Our Bethel area in particular needs focus, as the birth rate there has doubled and 27% of youth there are living in poverty. Providing that area of our community with an outreach librarian for youth would provide both short-term and long-term benefits. Early childhood literacy services are imperative in ensuring equity in our community, and the children in the Bethel area need your help to give them that step forward. Please reconsider the proposed cuts to the library's already stretched budget and take one item off my son's future campaign list. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Chair, that concludes the list of people we have signed up for public comment during the allocated sign up time, but we do have one person who signed up after that period ended. And I'd like to know if you want to add that person to speak.
Yeah, we have plenty of time in the agenda. I say let's err in the direction of maximum comment.
Okay, thank you. Paul Goss is our next and final speaker. Paul, I promoted you to panelist. You should be able to share your video and speak now. Thanks.
First of all, I'm Paul Goss in Ward 8 of Eugene. I'm a Friends of the Eugene Public Library volunteer and on the board, and I'd like to offer these comments on our community library tonight. Early literacy and ESL are crucial needs, especially in the underrepresented communities like the Bethel area. The library is a key focal point for community activities and opportunities for these community members. Our library won a national recognition award for our library programs, showing creativity and caring. The point is, it matters. Our library lowers technological, economic, and educational barriers at a critical time, providing opportunities to fill in and submit applications for jobs and government services, which must be filled out online. Gaps in literacy have widened, and families are more cost burdened than ever. Literacy is equality. The dollars the community spends on the library pays dividends in community welfare and long-term prosperity of its patrons and its community members. Our library plays a key active role in helping our unhoused community members get critically needed services outside of the shelters and other community services in downtown and the branches. It's a safe center representing all the activities that go on in Eugene. The story times, public bathrooms, special reading and learning programs, cooling facilities, and civic events, to name just a few of the things that the community library provides. Money is necessary to maintain these mandatory services to our downtown and surrounding communities. Without it, these services will cost the community much more. I kindly ask you to carefully consider these communities and not reduce its budget. And I also want to say that for my grandchildren, they especially count on these programs. And I know my great grandchildren who are just now becoming readers will also appreciate that. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. And that was our final speaker tonight for public comment. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is our trio of staff presentations. We do have, though, like we said, a fair amount of time on the agenda. So just like last week, if anyone has a direct response they wanted to make, I'm willing to offer 1 minute to any committee members who go ahead and raise their hand if they have something to say to anyone who gave comment. Or yeah, I see Ryan Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment. You open these meetings each and every time talking about our duty to keep in mind we're making decisions for people who don't have the luxury of being in these meetings or speaking to us. And I'm struck by, you know, we are dealing with cuts to Greenhill, which handles the pets that are taken when someone is in crisis on the streets and returning them, connecting them back to the people, cutting services at the library, which we've heard provide a host of benefits for the in-house community, and other cuts alongside increasing funding for camp cleanups. And so I'm toying, it's half-baked right now, but I'm toying with a motion for next week where we can address that imbalance. I don't know what that's going to look like, but just flagging that right now.
Thank you. Any other direct response to public comment? All right, in that case, let's, Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was a little short on the slow on the uptake there. I also want to add in my thanks to everybody that testified and that has been writing us. I'm also very concerned about the reduction in fire protection services, which is much more than just fire protection. And they're on the front lines as well, helping our disadvantaged community. And it's part of a larger system. So I really look forward to digging in and seeing how we can best minimize some of these impacts in these areas. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I've got some ideas, but I'll get into later. But I just want the public to know that we are taking this very seriously, and we are trying to do the best we can to navigate through some pretty difficult waters right now. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and thank you for a chance to comment.
Thank you. And I think that offers us a wonderful segue into our staff presentations, which are going to be starting with Chief Caven.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, Council, Budget Committee members. Mike Caven, Eugene Springfield Fire. Bear with me just a moment as I get my screen share up. Everybody see that okay? We got to figure out how to move my Zoom bar away from the presentation. I can't share. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so again, thanks everybody for the time to hear about the Indian reduction and the impact to the Department of Community through this budget process. I want to appreciate everybody's time in this. There's a big challenge that we've all been working on for the better part of a year and trying to close the gap and determine strategies to best secure services, core services, but also, meet our financial goals. And so as I move into this, I'd be hesitant not to mention appreciation for all city staff as we struggle to meet the demands of our work, and in particular for the organization I'm charged with leading. The individuals that serve Eugene Springfield Fire do it with great honor And whereas many departments in facing staffing issues over this last year have closed apparatus on the daily, ours continue to show up and make sure that our units were staffed, and greatly appreciate their work and want to acknowledge that. So as we move in, as you've read through your budget and you've heard, part of our budget reduction strategy is the replacement of an engine with what we call a squad. So tonight I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the history of fire suppression and first response services here in the city of Eugene, a little bit of explanation time on what this strategy really means, what a squad's capable of, what it's not capable of, and then close out with some considerations as you think about the future and how a revenue committee or what other options might be leveraged in consideration for the needs of the fire services. So with that, Eugene Fire Department was established in 1872. We just celebrated our 150th anniversary, which is a big milestone for the organization. We've seen a lot of change, far more than the few benchmarks that you see here. The relevance of the benchmarks on this timeline really talk about where our service experienced some of the biggest changes and where it last received investment in response resources. And so in 1981, which Councilor Groves will probably remember, he was on the job when the city of Eugene took over ambulance service. That was a big change to the work that the fire department does, and a forecast into the future of what some of our greatest demands for service and on staff would be. In 2002, Engine 9 was moved from the Valley River Station and moved to the Santa Clara area, where there was an identified significant gap as more and more properties entered our community. Station was eventually constructed there. And in 2006, the last fire suppression and first response resource was added to the city system, which was Engine 9 at the Valley River Station. That was staffed on a SAFER grant, meaning a federal grant that had a 4-year performance period where we were able to ease into the funding of these resources. You'll hear a little bit more about that at the end of this presentation about strategies we're employing to try to restore the engine company. And then of further interest just in our system, in 2010, we began our consolidation with the City of Springfield Fire and Life Safety, removing boundaries and barriers between our two communities, which eventually became Eugene Springfield Fire, still a shared service between our two cities with two different budgets. But most notably in 2014, all of our personnel are eligible to work wherever they're assigned within the communities, regardless of which city employs them, which applies some great flexibility in making sure that we can try to cover as many calls as we can. But as you'll see in some upcoming slides, sometimes that's a daunting task. So, whoops, sorry. So this slide is just to ground you in kind of the history of where things have been. I talked about that big change of accepting ambulance service in 1981. And we look at the demand for service on the resources were 2,822 calls per year. In 2007, when we last added a response resource to the system, calls were about 20,509. And then enter 2022, where the demand for service in the city of Eugene alone, so these numbers don't account for the total of Eugene Springfield Fire's work, there was 35,750 calls for service. As we move to the bottom part of the slide, this is just representative of the minimum daily staffing that were allotted for first response and suppression resources. And in 1981, there was 37 personnel. And today in 2023, there's 38 personnel. There was 10 stations staffed in 1981, and there's 11 stations staffed today. And so there's been some changes throughout that history about what types of resources are staffed, where they're staffed, but the reality is the number of firefighters eligible to work hasn't really changed, yet the demand for service and the scope of services that we're providing, the skill set that folks bring to the table has increased in that time frame. Back to the last resource that was added, so this is just a quick reflection of the total call volume is up 74%. If we look all the way back to 1981, which is a long time, it's 1,260%. The average calls are up about the same amount. Our population has grown 11.46%. There's been a minimal change in response personnel, but the overall number of firefighters per thousand of population has decreased almost 10% in that time frame. So funding for the fire department, as you can see, we've received kind of general growth. The cost of doing business and maintaining fire stations, the cost of apparatus, personnel, and everything that goes into this has increased, and we enjoy those increases in helping maintain the base level of services that we have. But fire operations, first response, and suppression services are funded by two primary functions. The general fund tax receipts from the city of Eugene, and then contract services with our rural fire districts who pay into the general fund to help support service within their areas. So in this 2023 to 2025 proposed budget, effectively the funding reduction is $1.5 million per year for a total of $3 million over the biennium. What are we changing in our service? Basically, we'll be standing down a full service engine company. It's eliminated and replaced with a squad. A squad is a two-person unit that's capable of responding to lower priority and lower acuity calls without causing further response gaps in the system. However, the gaps that remain in doing so are the inability to respond to those high-risk, high-acuity calls, structure fires, motor vehicle accidents, active violent incidents, cardiac arrests, and some of those things. And this next slide will kind of jump into hopefully a visual to help ground folks into what are we able to leverage in the replacement of this engine so there's not a large gap in the system. An engine company, they're available to respond to anything. So any of these issues, they're able to address. They have the tools, the training, the capabilities of dealing with those. But as we move down towards our common call types, we look at what is the squad capable of doing. It can respond to the structure fire, but with limited ability to actually address the problem. Gas leaks, it's the same thing. Wildfires, it will look similar to this vehicle from Los Angeles County, which has some limited firefighting capability that would be functional in the wildland setting. However, total number of personnel to fight fire and water that it's bringing to the incident are limited. Tent fires, it's the same thing. Typically, it would be able to handle those. However, sometimes those involve multiple campsites, and the challenge is personnel and water to quickly deal with the problem. Dumpster fires, the same thing. We've seen a pretty significant increase over recent years in dumpster fires. A lot of times those are up against buildings. So the squad could help slow that fire. But in the interest of overall protection, we'll need to send an engine to make sure that we have the firepower to deal with the problem at hand before it gets too large. Vehicle fires, squad's not really capable, doesn't bring enough water. It takes between 500 and 1,000 gallons of water to deal with your normal vehicle fire, let alone what we're facing with the risks associated with electric vehicles. Vehicle accidents, same story. They'll be able to respond and support the incident. It'll still require a fire engine because an important part of what a fire engine does on a motor vehicle accident is provide blocking. It's 50,000 pounds of protection for the firefighters that are working in the street, providing patient care. The engine also does an important role in providing fire protection for crews just in case while they're working in that extrication environment that a fire doesn't ignite, putting the patient and or responders at risk. Cardiac arrest, it is capable of responding. However, in our current model, which we've seen great success with, in fact, we got our stats back for 2022, where witnessed cardiac arrest with bystander CPR, our survival rate in the Eugene Springfield area was over 60%, which is the highest it's been. And a part of that is about the number of personnel that we put on scene for those cardiac arrests. So they could get there quick, they can start the early intervention, but we'll still need to send additional resources to support that effort. Active violent incidents, so these are things like active shooters, any other type of violence. The way that those are planned and deployed require crews of 3 to provide patient evaluation and rapid extrication. Crews train extensively in this. And so, again, the unit can get there and help support, but it's not fully equipped to manage that. EMS calls, which we recognize are a majority of our first response issues. This is where the squad helps really fill that void in the system. They're able to respond. We don't need an additional resource to do that. So we won't see that downstream ripple effect in the system missing an engine from that station. The squad can handle that. And then regular service calls where we see water leaks, odors, hydrant leaking, you name it, the squad still be able to assist in that. And so whereas not the perfect solution, it is a solution that fits within our budget authority to make sure that we're protecting the community the best we can with the resources available. And so to kind of wrap this up, looking into the future, revenue needs to be identified primarily as we kind of discussed about our past and our current reality as far as response capabilities. Restoring the engine through whatever revenue sources might be identified through the upcoming revenue committee. We have submitted a grant that would fund that fire company for 3 years to the federal government. That's under review right now. We should hear at some point during calendar year 23 if that's moving forward. But the total value of that grant and paying for that engine is $7.7 million. And so it's tremendous investment. It's an opportunity. We look for grants in every place that we can find it to help supplement our operations. Recognizing the significant increase in call volume, the addition of two-person CRU, which is similar to the squad and previously planned, is more like a pickup truck. No firefighting capability, but it has paramedics on it with all the medical gear to help take care of those calls that don't necessarily, on an EMS perspective, require a fire engine and 3 people to show up. Staffing in Station 17, that was been discussed. We had a study done in 2017 that identified the need in the vicinity of the EWEB property. So identifying strategies to staff that station as the community goes vertical and more dense, in particular in the downtown core. And then also addressing the need for the industry standard 4-person staffing in that densely populated core where carrying firefighting equipment to elevated areas and the other overall complexity of those types of incidents require us as our city modernizes to modernize our fire department. And so those are things that we're looking out into the future and look forward to engaging in further conversation with the council and budget committee on strategies for that. Again, I really appreciate all of you serving on this committee, taking time to learn a little bit more about this strategy. Look forward to the questions that will come up in the question and answer phase. And I'll yield the rest of my time to my colleagues.
Thank you, Chief. The next presentation on the agenda is our climate recovery.
Good evening, Budget Committee. I'm Matt Rodriguez, the Public Works Director, and bear with me for just 1 second while I get this presentation up. And please let me know if you're seeing the right screen. Look good?
Looks good.
All right, well, let's get started. So again, thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the proposed investments regarding climate recovery in the biennial budget. I'm going to talk briefly about kind of history of our climate work, a little bit about the status of the work, what you'll see in the proposed biennial budget that's different, and looking to the future. Okay. So history, our ongoing climate work represents the culmination of nearly 20 years of work and focus on climate-related action in the Eugene community. Much of the sustainability and climate work in Eugene has its foundation in many of the recommendations from the Sustainable Business Initiative Task Force, which was commissioned in 2005. The 2010 Climate and Energy Action Plan was the city's first community-wide action plan. It included 3 community-level goals for reducing local emissions and fossil fuel use that would become the basis for the Climate Recovery Ordinance, also known as the CRO. This was adopted first by Council in 2014 and then updated in 2016. And the CRO outlines both community goals and those focused on internal city operations. There are 3 main goals. The first, which is to reduce fossil fuel use by 50% compared to 2010 levels by 2030, and that applies to the community and internal city operations. The second is city operations and facilities will be carbon neutral by 2020. And that is also allowed to be done via offsets, which is how we're achieving that now, even though we have had operational emissions reductions over time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then third, tied to a goal relative to Eugene's share of 300 parts per million of carbon dioxide equivalent in the atmosphere, which is estimated to be about a 7.6% annual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. In 2018, city staff began the process to update the Community Climate Action Plan following the CRO work. And this started with the mayor convening a CRO ad hoc work group to develop what ultimately became the Climate Action Plan, or CAP 2.0. And this plan was approved by City Council in July of 2020. CAP 2.0 provides a 10-year roadmap for climate action planning and consideration of next steps for our future work. And one of the guiding principles of CAP 2.0 was the focus on building off existing plans, policies, and efforts to meet our climate goals. So as a result, many CAP actions are linked to implementation of existing policies and plans, such as the Transportation System Plan and Envision Eugene. And lastly, as many of you know, the Sustainability Program, which manages this work, moved to Public Works in 2022. And that was really to provide department level support and a closer connection to the high impact climate action work that is done through Public Works programs, while still working across the entire organization in the community. So progress against the Climate Recovery Ordinance goals is measured through greenhouse gas inventories. And that's basically a check on emissions reduction progress as it compares to our CRO goals. The city updates greenhouse gas inventories for the community and for internal city operations every 2 years. The last time we did this was in 2022 using data for calendar year 2021. And I want to caveat that we all know that was a bit of a weird year due to the pandemic, and people were using transportation and buildings a little differently, but it's still good information. So for the community progress, our 2021 emissions showed a reduction of fossil fuel use of 14% compared to the 2010 baseline. If we're going to meet 50% reduction by 2030, that of course means we need to reduce an additional 36% to get there in our fossil fuel use. For internal city operations, our fossil fuel use was reduced by 25% compared to the 2010 baseline. And this reduction was really primarily achieved through phasing out, steam energy, which was generated through fossil fuel use in 2013, and a switch from fossil diesel to renewable diesel for our city fleet. In addition, since 2020, the City of Eugene has been purchasing offsets from the Climate Trust to meet the carbon neutral goals of the Climate Recovery Ordinance. All right. Just to give you a little bit of scale, the most recent greenhouse gas inventory of city operations found that our total internal emissions was about 5,200 metric tons. And that's actually quite low. And a lot of the reason it's quite low is because of the, supplanting of fossil diesel we talked about, but also because of the low carbon energy that we get through EWEB. So it's really advantageous to us as a community. Relating to our ongoing Climate Action Plan implementation, while the Sustainability Program manages and coordinates our climate action work, both internally and with our community partners, implementation of the work really happens across departments and program areas. A few examples include implementation of our Transportation System Plan, which accounts for a large share of emissions reductions in the CAP 2.0, our Urban Forestry Program, purchasing of energy efficient vehicles and alternative fuels, as I've mentioned, energy efficiency projects for city facilities, waste prevention, land use and housing planning implementation as well. It also includes working with Eugene Climate Collaborative partner organizations, which are really organizations whose work has the ability to influence the way our city meets our climate recovery goals, whether it be through provision of energy, transportation, buildings, housing, or other means. So let's talk a little bit about the proposed budget and kind of how we got to here. So while much of the sustainability program work over the years has been supported by one-time investments, in recent years, the sustainability program has added FTE with budget committee and council support to build capacity and move the program forward. This includes the addition of a half FTE in both FY22 and FY23 that has gotten us to our 2 FTE total, so 2 people total that are funded in the program. This proposed biennial budget includes an additional FTE, which brings us to 3, and that FTE would be funded by our solid waste and recycling fund, and that comes from licensing fees from our waste haulers. The purpose of adding this FTE is to bolster our climate action planning analysis, implementation, and tracking, support for internal and external partner coordination, and to pursue historic federal funding opportunities that align with our climate action planning and other city goals. Looking to the future, this biennial budget will really help resource the sustainability program as it strives to increase our ability to track and review proposed state and federal legislation and rulemaking. As we all know, it's a pretty dynamic time for both legislation and then the following rulemaking to really understand what we need to do to meet these requirements and where we may have an overlap between what's required and what we're really trying to achieve through our community goals. To build upon our previous modeling work and work done by the state to refine cost benefit information and help inform implementation of climate actions. So there's been a lot of good work, some done through our decarbonization plan study, other work done by the state, and some of the work that's gone to the Oregon Global Warming Commission that really helps us understand where the best bang for our buck is to invest, and also to help us understand where we have the biggest opportunity for really meeting multiple objectives with investments. So for instance, insulating a home that not only reduces energy use, but provides comfort for the people inside of it, or some type of energy efficiency improvement for a business that would reduce their operating costs and emissions that really help them to thrive. So really looking for those opportunities to prioritize our investments. Expand our ability to support and coordinate outreach and engagement efforts. There's a lot of engagement, as you know, happening in the community, and we're really trying to work with all the folks doing that around the city organization to understand how we can weave in our engagement around our climate work and really have a better connection with all communities around the city and be really efficient with resources and their time as well. Develop partnerships and coordinate with partners where our goals align to pursue regional solutions and funding asks. We've really found throughout the years that we're most successful with grant asks both at the state and federal level if we can get to a regional ask. And we've been working with our partners to really understand where do we have that overlap where there might be an opportunity to make an ask together. And I'm kind of excited about the potential to do that. And increase our capacity to pursue federal and state funding opportunities. This overlaps with the last bullet a little bit, but these are kind of fast-moving grant opportunities that have a high level of complexity, and this additional FTE will really help us navigate that and leverage as much of this, the funding coming out of the federal government as we can to really benefit our community. And lastly, improve the tracking of climate actions and bolster our communications with the community on action progress, which I know has been something we've been striving for a while. So that is my presentation, and I will send it back for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Clark, you had your hand up for a bit there.
Yes, sir. Can we do a question at this point, or are we holding them for later?
If we can hold them for later, please.
Cool.
Get through the presentations, and we can ask questions in round one of the discussion. Our next presentation, our last presentation, is on urban renewal, everyone's favorite topic.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully this works okay. Okay. All right. I'm Ann Fifield. I'm the Economic Development Manager in the Community Development Division. I'm here this evening with Maurizio Badalico from Finance to talk about the city's urban renewal districts and how they could be used to increase revenue to the city's general fund. Tonight, I'll provide a quick overview of some of urban renewal's key concepts, which many of you are very familiar with, but we want to make sure that you all and community members watching have a shared understanding. And then I'll provide a short update on progress in both the downtown and riverfront districts, and Maurizio will then describe the proposal around the frozen base. We have two urban renewal districts in Eugene, the downtown shown in yellow and the riverfront shown in light brown. Urban renewal is a tool to focus funding in a specific geography, which is an urban renewal district. In an urban renewal district, the district collects what's known as tax increment. Urban renewal is also known as tax increment financing, or TIF. Urban renewal uses tax increment to fund capital improvements in an urban renewal district. In Oregon, urban renewal districts must have a plan that documents what are eligible capital projects to be funded by tax increment. The plan identifies the future investments, and the district uses tax increment to fund those investments. I'll use this chart to explain. The vertical axis shows property tax revenue, and the horizontal axis shows time. The first thing you do in an urban renewal district is define a boundary and form the district, and you calculate the assessed taxable value in that district, and this is the frozen base. It's the taxable assessed value in year one, and revenue from that value goes to all the overlapping taxing district, which includes the city, the county, and school district 4J. The frozen base doesn't change over time. It's frozen. That revenue from the frozen base goes to the overlapping districts throughout the life of the district. But over time, the taxable assessed value grows. That revenue from the incremental value goes to the urban renewal district, and that's why it's called tax increment. The tax revenue from the increment is a useful tool to fund improvements to buildings and infrastructure. It cannot fund operations like police officers, and it cannot fund projects outside the district. It can be used to fund projects that are identified in the urban renewal plan. When the district expires, the incremental tax revenue goes back to the overlapping taxing districts. The current downtown plan makes 4 specific projects eligible for urban renewal funds that are listed here. The district has supported a lot more projects over the years, including the library, the new LCC downtown campus, the Broadway Commerce Center, and lots more. The investments in the downtown district have helped the community to move toward multiple goals, including our climate goals, economic prosperity, and increasing the housing supply. One of the most recently completed projects is the new Farmers Market Pavilion. This new facility had its grand opening in June of 2022 and has hosted the farmers market ever since. Thousands of people come to the downtown on Saturdays to go to the farmers market. Farmers and other food producers from across the region come to our farmers market on Saturdays. And this new structure, the pavilion, is growing their economic opportunity while making our downtown more vibrant. We've also recently completed work in the park blocks and open space category. We made improvements to the connection between the Halt Center and the Graduate Hotel to make it a better pedestrian experience, which will help draw people from the train station and the Fifth Street Market area across 6th and 7th into the downtown core. This picture shows work in progress to improve the sidewalk. We also installed wayfinding signs throughout the downtown area. These are oriented for pedestrians and help folks find their way to and within the downtown. And we recently constructed a public restroom in the park blocks known as the Portland Loo, providing a much needed service to the community. The district also funded the construction of the fiber network in the downtown known as UGeNet. That project included an expansion of an interconnect facility that's owned and operated by LCOG, shown here. That expansion of the interconnect facility has enabled the expansion of internet service across the region from private internet service providers. The fiber project was an economic development project to make it possible for firms with high bandwidth needs to locate in our downtown. It successfully did that, but the expansion of the interconnect site has had really far-reaching impacts by increasing access to major internet hubs in California and in Portland. It's helped attract private internet service providers to expand their services throughout the rest of Eugene and even across Lane County. The physical investment was in the urban renewal district, but the benefits have had a really wide regional reach. The district also has funds set aside to support the redevelopment of 1059 Willamette, which formerly housed the LCC downtown campus. We're working with the development team to redevelop the site into housing. We're working with them to get a development agreement signed before the end of this fiscal year. The proposed project will be called the Montgomery, and it's planned to include 129 units, half of which will be income qualified for households with incomes up to 80% of our area median income. This spring, City Council is considering amending that district's plan, which would allow funds to be used to incentivize private investments in housing and make improvements to public spaces. We've also been doing a lot of work in the Riverfront District. The Riverfront Urban Renewal District was last substantially amended in 2004, and its plan identifies categories of eligible projects, including public improvements, land acquisition, and redevelopment support. Over the last few years, we've focused on the redevelopment of the downtown Riverfront site, formerly eWeb's industrial yard, to implement the vision documented in the 2010 eWeb Riverfront Master Plan. In 2018, the Urban Renewal Agency purchased that 16-acre site from eWeb, and since we've made significant improvements and investments to spur the site's redevelopment. One of the first things we've done is install infrastructure. We've constructed the water, wastewater, stormwater, and road networks needed to support an urban neighborhood. The site had been an industrial yard and was mostly paved surface lots with some support buildings. The picture on the left shows the site in 2019, not so long ago. You can see the old bike path along the river and the steam plant in the background. The picture on the right was taken last July. The new roads are in place, and under them are all the essential underground infrastructure like water and wastewater. This work has created a landscape that makes it possible to create a new neighborhood. We've also constructed the Riverfront Park. It was completed last June and was ready for all the visitors that came to Eugene last summer for the World Athletics event. This 3-acre linear park has new walking and bike paths, native vegetation, and several new river overlooks. We will start working on the plaza in 2024. All of this investment in infrastructure has laid the groundwork so that the work of creating a neighborhood can begin. The agency has entered a development agreement with the development team Adkins Dame in 2019. Adkins Dame's planned multi-use concept includes hundreds of new housing units and new retail spaces. They're buying individual parcels and then beginning the vertical development process. The first residential building is under construction now. It's shown here. This building is just east of the viaduct and sits on a new extension, that new extension of Fifth Avenue that's shown on the right side of the picture. And that's one of our new wayfinding signs in the foreground. This building is scheduled to be finished next spring. Adkins Dame has also started the foundation work on their second residential building on the newly constructed block of Mill Street between 4th and 5th Avenues. This area is being transformed from that industrial utility yard into a neighborhood with hundreds of new residents. These two buildings will bring 225 new units to this area. The sidewalks and the bike paths will be full of people who'll be living in this neighborhood that's in walking distance to the university and the downtown core all along the Willamette River. This fall, City Council will consider amending the Riverfront District Plan so that it can make further investments in the riverfront and other parts of the district. A lot of work has been completed in both districts in the last few years. It has had a positive impact, and we'll see more positive impacts as people start to move into the downtown riverfront. Both districts have experienced increases to their taxable assessed value, the tax increment that funds the district. There's a way for the districts to share some of that tax increment with the general fund by increasing the frozen base. As urban renewal investments catalyze more private investment in the districts, the increment grows. This proposal treats the district and its increment almost like an endowment that gives off dividends to support the whole city. I'll turn it over to Maurizio now, who will explain the proposal to increase the frozen base.
Thank you, Anne. Good evening, Budget Committee members. My name is Maurizio Badalico. I'm from the Finance Division, and I will be reviewing some of the key points regarding the proposal to increase the frozen base. So I'm going to start here with the same chart that Anne showed earlier. So this provides a visual representation of increasing the frozen base, that extra blue box that showed up. You can see that increasing the frozen base reduces the amount of incremental value for the urban renewal district. The impact of increasing the frozen base is that the associated property tax revenue goes to the overlapping taxing jurisdictions instead of the urban renewal district. State statutes allow urban renewal districts to increase the frozen base, but the increase is permanent and cannot be subsequently decreased. The frozen base assessed taxable value would increase by an amount that would generate $400,000 per year for the general fund. The proposed biennial budget includes this additional revenue starting in FY25, which is the second year of the biennium. Both urban renewal districts are currently in different stages of considering plan amendments. Without approved plan amendments, tax increment collection would end for both districts in fiscal year 24, which is the first year of the biennium. If tax increment collection does end for one or both districts in FY24, then the general fund would receive more revenue in FY25 than the current frozen base proposal. So as agency board conversations continue and the future of both urban renewal districts becomes more certain, the agency board would also decide which district to increase the frozen base. It could be either urban renewal district on its own, or perhaps a combination of both districts to achieve the target general fund revenue amount. In order for the general fund to receive $400,000 annually, the urban renewal district would forego $800,000 per year. The reason for this is that the urban renewal district consolidated tax rate is double the city's permanent tax rate, because the urban renewal rate is made up of tax rates from multiple overlapping taxing jurisdictions. The primary practical implication of reduced revenue for an urban renewal district is that it would take longer to collect enough tax increment revenue to reach the spending limit in the plan. The remainder of the revenue foregone by an urban renewal district that does not go to the city's general fund would go to the other overlapping taxing jurisdictions. The majority of that remainder goes to school district 4J, but the impact on 4J's budget is more complicated due to property tax compression and the state school funding formula. School district 4J benefits financially from the existence of urban renewal, and that would continue under the frozen base proposal. And that is the end of our prepared comments tonight, and we will of course be around after the break to answer any questions you may have.
Wonderful, thank you very much. The agenda calls for a break after the presentations, but we are way ahead of schedule, and so I'm leaning towards having us do one round robin of direct questions on the presentations now. Then we'll go ahead and take our break and we can come back with our first round robin of just general topics. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the round robin order staff prepared for this meeting and place that into chat. And for direct questions, that means I'm now going to turn to Councillor Groves, followed by Zach Mulholland.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any direct questions at this point. I think I'm understanding the raising of the frozen base, which I think is might be interesting as we get into discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach, followed by Councillor Keating.
Thank you. Go trying maybe go backwards here. On the urban renewal, what is the current tax increment on each of the districts?
All right, I'm looking to share my video here. Are you looking for the dollar amount of tax increment revenue generated by the district?
Like on an annual basis, how much is each one? What is the tax increment?
Yeah, sure. So in the downtown district, in FY23, we expect to receive about 2.75 million. And in the Riverfront District, we're looking at approximately 3.37 million in FY23 in the current year.
Thank you. Jumping to climate recovery, can you speak a bit more about the analysis, implementation, and tracking that you're looking at doing? Like, how are you tracking progress on CAP 2.0 actions currently to know if we're, completing those on the time frame laid out in the CAP 2.0 implementation plan?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Zach. I mean, it's a work in progress. So as you know, we turned over both of our staff in the sustainability program at the end of 21. We got a new sustainability manager last September, and then we got our analyst in just a couple months ago. So they've been doing a lot of work to build up and basically update where our status is for a number of the high priority actions. Actually, Ian, our sustainability manager, has kind of put together a little status list that's not a full kind of like implementation plan update, but really starting to build that information towards an implementation plan progress update. We're also looking at how we might move forward with the dashboard in the future. As you know, we have a dashboard that we put out that's kind of a static dashboard, and we're looking to understand whether there might be different tools that we could use for that, either static but updated regularly, or something more dynamic that could be available to the community.
Great, thank you. I know we're doing decently on EVs, but sort of moving backwards on bike ped and not making as good a progress as we want on the building sector. So look forward to seeing the update on the implementation plan in that area when that's due. Jumping over to the fire engine, one of our commenters at the beginning of the meeting mentioned an inability of fire trucks to go to additional calls because they were on because of a lack of ambulances. Can you speak to the need for different levels of emergency response, and where are we most lacking right now? Is that on the fire engine side, or on ambulances, or on squad size units, and where do we need to expand versus remain steady?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So what they're referring to in Friday in particular, which happens quite frequently, is we run out of units. On Friday, we actually ran out of fire suppression units as well, covering fire calls and medical calls. Like we spoke last meeting, fire engines provide a critical first response capability with trained paramedics and all the equipment that's carried on an ambulance, because we know our ambulances are quite busy. And then now a more recent development is that sometimes they'll sit on the wall at the hospital waiting to offload a patient for minutes to hours. As far as investments in the system, the ambulances are an enterprise fund. They do receive some supplementation in helping keep them trued up, but they're a cost for our fee for service model, and we're pretty much tapped out in what kind of fees we can recover. We do have a consulting firm working with us right now to make sure we're maximizing all available revenue opportunities and fee recovery on our ambulances. So to the point of what is it that the system really needs, there's a couple things. There are places where additional fire engines are needed just for our ability to get to places in a reasonable amount of time, and then staffing in our core for dense urban development. The CRU, which I touched on, was a unit that was planned and funded by the CSI, whose job was designed to use 2 people in a smaller vehicle to respond to a lot of these kind of growing demand for emergency medical services. And so that's what we need to invest in the future, among other development needs around fire engines, is those units, because they can also not only do the first response work that's taken a lot of time from fire suppression units, they also can engage in the 911 prevention work. Those are all things that we're working on, just limited by resources at this time.
Can you go into a little bit more detail on CRU units? What do those consist of? What do those look like?
Yeah, so the Community Response Unit is what CRU stands for. Think of it like, you know, either an F-150 type pickup, a Ford Ranger, something small, maneuverable, that only has 2 people on it, whose primary core mission it is to respond to the lower acuity and kind of middle range emergency medical calls that we see as a big portion of more of our exponential growth in problems. We're still seeing some significant fire growth, but overall, those units would take capacity, critical capacity out of the system.
They would add a capacity to the system.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. So they would add capacity. The one that was planned was for peak hours. So that's another benefit of that system, using our new single role. So, you know, just EMT trained personnel to respond to those calls, and the ability to do it only for the hours where it's critically needed, where the system is at its busiest. So it's a much more cost-effective investment to that growing problem. Doesn't solve all the problems, but it is a big solution for the volume.
Thank you. Then can you give me a little more detail on the ambulance? So it's a fee for service, so we're not in charge of it. We don't own the ambulances, I take it. And so if we wanted to expand the number of ambulances, that's not necessarily our decision.
Oh no, the ambulances belong to the cities of Eugene and Springfield. We're Oregon's largest public ambulance transport provider. The reality is they're enterprise funds, and so they are funded by fee for service. And in years where we're not getting all those fees covered, we rely on some general fund to support it. But we're at that point where if we added ambulance capacity, all of that investment would need to come from either the general fund or exploring a new fee option to help support that service in and of itself. So we've made some pretty significant gains in recent years in utilizing limited duration non-union BLS ambulances to take the most low acuity calls out of the system, experienced great success with that. And we're in the middle of transitioning some of our ambulances to single role positions, which are a little more cost effective, and we're able to leverage the savings from that to additional capacity in the basic life support system. And so we're doing kind of everything we can to stretch that system, but adding ambulances is a direct dollar for dollar impact to a new revenue stream.
And then in terms of need in comparison for ambulances in comparison to CRUs or more engines?
So again, I wish it was a simple answer. Engines are as much based on geographical ability to do their mission set within defined response times. And so as we grow in certain areas of the city, there are needs for engines. The critical need for first response capability comes in the form of CRUs. But yeah, the ambulance transport system, absolutely. You know, we've been working on strategies on how to fund that into the future. But I would say ambulances and CRUs are kind of those next identified needs in system growth.
Thanks. I think that's all my questions with regards to the presentations.
Thank you. Councilor Keating, followed by Siobhan Cancel.
Thank you, Chair. I guess it's connected to Chief Caven's presentation, and it's kind of the sequel to our work session earlier today. Chief, good to see so much of you today. And it's really large. It's more of a conversation for the proposed revenue committee. But I just want to put it on the record here at the Budget Committee, my enthusiasm for exploring long-term funding for our first responders, in particular our fire department, in regards to vacant or abandoned residential and vacant commercial buildings, some sort of tax on those vacant buildings in the long term. I won't rehash our work session conversation, but I just want to put that on the record in the Budget Committee. My first question is for Matt Rodriguez, Public Works Director. Matt, what's the number of FTE Public Works are requesting? I heard in particular at the end of your conversation or at the end of your presentation, a request for grant for FTE in regards to grants and accessing federal dollars.
This is one FTE, Councillor Keating. So that's the proposal, is to add one FTE to the sustainability program team, which is 2 now, so it'd be 3 total.
Are there, and am I right in framing that it's accessing federal dollars and grants?
That's just part of it. Okay. So there's a whole long list. It's more capacity basically for all the work to implement the climate action plan, to do outreach around community decarbonization planning, to work with our partners. The federal funding is just an opportunity that's more near term with the federal funding bills.
Understood. Where my brain went was an opportunity to maybe have someone 0.5 in Public Works, 0.5 library doing some of the similar or same work. Sounds like that might be complicated considering the multiple elements in regards to executing CAP as well. Have there been any conversations or exploration around potential sharing of library staff that are currently positions that aren't filled that may be able to do more within the municipality while filling some of those holes, short-term or long-term?
So I don't know of, I can't think of off the top of my head any kind of formal conversations on that. I will say that, you know, our library team around research especially is very talented, and we have used their services in Public Works, and when we had Unified Command for really helping us with those processes. So I don't think it's, you know, out of the range that we could use library resource for that. I don't think it, from my view, I don't think it takes away the need for this position to really work on, you know, the scale of the CAP, and the work we need to do is pretty big.
Understood.
With limited folks.
You can see the kernel of the concept that I'm attempting to come up with, and I certainly don't want to do that on the fly. I just want to see if those conversations have been had, or it's worth exploring, and I would submit that it is. Sticking with the library, but shifting to Anne, if I could. In the last 10 years, I recognize that the library is within the urban renewal district. In the last 10 years, has the library always been in the downtown urban renewal district?
Yes, Councillor, it has. The district funded its construction.
Yep. In addition to the construction, are there any other pieces? And I want to say that was what, 2003, 2002, 2003? Is that right? 20 years ago, roughly?
I predates my time at the city. I have to.
Mine too.
Yes.
That's not important. What is important is that urban renewal dollars have been used for the library in the past in regards to improving infrastructure at the library. Are there any elements that you see where urban renewal dollars could be used toward the library that could free up existing resources or plans the library has that could then free up opportunities to invest in hiring additional staff, recognizing fully the legal complications in using urban renewal dollars for staff? I understand that, but is there a way to make those investments in the physical infrastructure that would then free up the library to bring on more personnel?
We haven't been part of conversations about physical improvements to the library. I know it's getting re-roofed right now. I think it was.
You'd have to, I'm going to jump in here. Sorry, Anne.
That's great.
You would have to, several, however many years ago, there was a way in which we were able to use urban renewal funds to pay off debt that was being paid by the general fund, and that created an ongoing general fund stream. I don't know of any of those opportunities, but we'll certainly, we're going to be tracking this entire conversation and researching what are some possibilities. I don't believe there are any.
Well, if I could underscore, bold, and italicize my enthusiasm for trying to find some, that would be much appreciated. I know there's a fourth floor that could use some love, and conversations about moving the children's area up a floor or two. And so I just want to go on record for illustrating my enthusiasm for finding
thank you, Councilor,
creative
for the
ways.
enthusiasm.
Thank you. If I'm at a time, am I at a time, Chair? I don't see a
yes,
timer.
you are.
Okay, I
Sorry,
don't see the timer, but it might be on my end of the way I have my Zoom screen.
Yes,
Can
you
I
are.
put myself in for a 30-second round?
I'm not going to do a second round on these, but we can certainly revisit all these points during round one of the general discussion after the break.
Cool. After the break, just so staff's aware, I want to shift the conversation to 10:59. We'll have it. And apologize for taking up my colleague's time. I do not see a timer.
Thank you. Siobhan, followed by Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone for the presentations. It's a lot to unpack there. I don't have any specific questions at this time.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka, followed by Councilor Semple.
Thanks, Chair. Couple of questions about urban renewal. Hold on a second. My camera's going crazy. Couple of questions about urban renewal. So my understanding is that urban renewal dollars next are going to be taking in for the two districts for Riverfront 2.7 million per year and downtown 3.37. That's correct, right?
That's correct, but it was reversed. The Riverfront is taking in more.
Oh, okay.
Sorry if I said that wrong.
No, I probably just wrote it down wrong. Is that after the frozen base?
No, that is current right now as it is now. So the frozen base would remove $800,000 roughly from those numbers. Yeah.
The total 6 million.
That's correct.
Roughly. Okay. And so if we say needed to garner another $400,000 back into the general fund, the frozen base theoretically could be increased another $800,000, or would be increased to get an $800,000 worth, which would give the general fund another $400,000. Have I got that right?
That's correct. You can assume a 2-for-1. So however much you need, or whatever the desired amount is in the general fund, you can double it, and that would be the impact, the negative impact on the districts.
And so urban renewal would get 6 million minus 800,000 under the current proposal, which would be 5.2 million, and then another, if we doubled it, it would be another 800,000 off, so it'd be 4.6 million instead of 6 million. Okay.
I agree with your math. Yeah.
Good. On the fly math is always dangerous, isn't it? Okay. That's the only questions I had. Thanks. That might be an opportunity for some, since the budget's a zero-sum game, that might be an opportunity for some additional revenue, which is as opposed to cutting some other service. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Semple, followed by Eliza Kaczynski.
Oh, Chair, one more point, privilege. I have a Laurel Hill Valley neighborhood meeting, so at the break, I'm going to go over there, but I'll be listening in, and I'll be coming in and out. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Semple.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentations. I do not have questions at this time.
Thank you. Then Eliza, followed by Raina Jackson.
Thank you to all of the presenters. Most of you answered most of my questions, except I do have some questions surrounding fire services. And so I figured I would say that first, so people have time to turn on their cameras. When you showed that graph that showed the very steep increase in calls for service, was that just calls for service that required a fire engine or similar? Or was that including calls for ambulance service, since it's funded out of a different fund, but it's connected? Is that all calls including ambulance, or is that excluding ambulance calls?
A significant number of the calls for service, so that's all calls for service, but nearly all of them receive some level of support from suppression companies because there's more of them, they're closer. So in Lane County Code, which sets the ambulance response time standards, which with our ambulances, we can't meet without using paramedics in a first response situation across our area. And so the reality is most all of those 35,000 calls for service in the city of Eugene have some fire engine on them.
Okay. And then you said a couple of times that these kind of EMS type calls for service were a significant percentage or a significant amount. Are we talking like is significant 20%? Is significant 80%? Like what are we kind of looking at there?
Yeah, so depending on neighborhoods or location in the city, that number can be anywhere between EMS being 80 to 85% of the total volume of work that's being done.
Okay.
So we continue to see fire responses grow, in particular in those areas in West Eugene and downtown, where we have a greater propensity of responses related to the unhoused.
Okay. And then I just wanted to make sure I understood a term correctly. I think it was on the ambulances were on the wall. Is that what you had said? Does that mean that they have taken the patient to the hospital, and because of some delay on the hospital's end, like they don't have enough nurses or something like that, they're continuing to care for that patient in the ambulance while they wait for the hospital to have capacity to bring that patient in? Is that what that term means?
Correct. Basically, our crews are caring for patients standing in the hallway at the hospital for sometimes hours at a time due to staffing or other priority issues within the hospital that creates some challenges for us.
And we don't have a ton of control over the hospitals, but it does show the interconnectedness of these different pieces.
Yeah, and I mean, I would note, despite the challenges and the big numbers, the hospitals, in particular Peace Health, they've been reasonable partners with us in trying to solve that, but it's not always perfect. We actually held a public hearing yesterday that will see us joining other agencies in the state and across the country in charging the hospital for excessive times, basically using our staff to supplement their staffing. So hopefully that will help. It's not going to solve all of our problems and not likely to be enough to add ambulances to the system, but every little bit helps right now, as you might imagine.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Raina, followed by Councilor Clark.
Eliza's questions and got some of the answers, but I also have some for Chief Caven. Just one of the slides had shown a linear line of, I believe it was FTE. It started at 37 and it's at 37, 38, 38. And that is the FTE, correct?
Yeah, so that is our daily minimum staffing assigned to suppression and first response resources.
Okay, so with the 6-person reduction, that's going to go down to 32.
With the 6-person reduction, that will drop us down to, because we're using the CSI funded CRU resource to fill that spot, the daily number goes down by 2. It's 6 total. So we have 3 shifts of firefighters that serve in our cities. And so that number just divided by 3.
Okay. And that would be the lowest that it has been in how long?
Since before I was born, a long time. I would have to defer to Councilor Groves if he knows when before that. But we don't have written record in the office. I went back as far as I could.
Okay, thank you. And then another question I had was in regards to the response capabilities. There were 11 key call types from structure fire to service calls. And it looks like out of those 11, only 2 really have like 100% where this new crew team would be able to fully support. That's the EMS calls and the service calls, which you spoke to with Eliza. My second question is how often or what's the percentage of these others like structure fire, gas leaks, dumpster fires that these individuals would not be able to respond to? Because this graph, it sounds like it would be 20% based on your saying 80 to 85% of the volume calls have to do with EMS. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, so in the area of the city that would be most likely targeted with this reduction, it's about 77% of EMS. We'd have to do a deeper kind of fractional divide on how many of those EMS calls, car accidents, cardiac arrests, or other high risk, high priority calls that take some extra hands. But so, I mean, we could just surmise, say, 65 to 70% of the calls they'd be able to handle. But that other percentage are, time sensitive, high risk calls and that take, multiple hands to accomplish. So it gets pretty granular in the complexities of that work.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, followed by myself.
Thank you, Chair. Just to alert staff, my first question is for Sarah. My second one is for Matt. My third one is for Chief Skinner. And my fourth one is for Chief Haven. Let's see if I can get them all. Sarah, along the lines of the question, and you may want to start my time. There we go. Along the lines of my friend Matt, I have an interesting question with urban renewal. Number one, we've bought ourselves a new city hall, which I think is really cool. And they've been kind enough to give us the deal of $8 million up front and another $4 million over time that we get to pay them. We've identified or discussed, or you've presented, that perhaps we use our facility reserve to pay that over, or excuse me, to use that $4 or $5 million that we don't have to pay up front, that we can instead use that facility reserve to make those sort of amends necessary to move into the building and have it functional for us and make any adjustments and new construction. My question, can we use Riverfront Urban Renewal to do that instead and thus free up those general fund dollars for other purposes?
I want to make sure that I'm giving you accurate information. So we did look at, I believe City Hall is actually listed in the Riverfront Urban Renewal Plan, but I don't know whether that would be towards the purchase price or whether it would be towards the improvements. But either way, I think it could be an eligible use.
Yeah, that's
and
what
if I'm wrong, Catherine can jump in here or Denny can and say, no, you're actually wrong.
That's what I'm hoping, that we may be able to do, plug some of these holes with that if we change how we're going to pay that $4 million to get in the room up front. I see Denny wanting. Love to hear him.
I would just add that the Riverfront plan is fairly broad about the possible uses of funds in the district. The problem in the Riverfront district is where we've basically reached our spending limit. So it would require a major plan amendment before we could probably consider using it for the City Hall building at this point.
Which we could do in concert with downtown, but that's another day. My second question is for Matt, if he's there somewhere. Thank you, sir. What's the allocation for this next year's budget to pay out of general fund dollars for carbon offsets?
So the annual carbon offset is in the range of $45,000 to $55,000.
So not huge. I got you. All right, that's what I want to know. Chief Skinner, if he's there. I gave a talk this morning to a bunch of business people at the chamber and had one of my constituents, oddly enough, ask the question that I didn't know the answer to. Of the public safety payroll tax dollars of the lot that have been collected over the last couple of years, I assume or recollect something in the range of 21 to 22 million or something like that. Am I right? I can't
Yes,
hear you.
that's correct.
All right. The question I was asked was, we did not spend 13 million of that last year. Is that an accurate number or true?
I do know that we've got a significant fund. I don't know the total number, Councillor Clark. I know we just had a meeting on this, and there's a significant number of significant amount of fund balance as a result of salary savings over this last year. What I would say is, as moving forward, most, if not all of that will be encumbered. And so we will not experience that same kind of savings year after year.
Sure, absolutely. Can you tell me, based on it's a different sort of authority, your plan for how to deal with those excesses from previous years?
Yeah, we're working on that right now with a variety of work groups on how to leverage those dollars that are within the spirit of what the Community Safety Initiative was designed to do to find some opportunities to invest that money. The one thing that we're really careful about is that's one-time money, because the rest of it's going to be encumbered. And so we're not looking at necessarily adding staff. It would be one-time dollars, much like what we did last year with some year-end spending, where we were able to buy some ambulances and fire.
And there's ordinance language that constricts those funds to the things promised in the original tax being floated in the first place, which brings up Chief Caven. I know that that's true for those funds from the public safety payroll tax that went to fire as well. My motion, when it comes, will be to ditch the squad that we added with the public safety payroll tax, restore the engine company, and take the differential of a few $100,000 in funds to make that whole for restoring the engine company. We will have to, in order to use those payroll tax dollars, have an amendment to that ordinance as well. My question, when and if we receive the grant you mentioned for 24 through 26, may we use those dollars to stand back up squad?
We would probably have to sort that out. The way the grant was written and originally planned was to address what I talked about in that last slide around 4-person staffing on our truck companies who provide a very specialized form of work. However, you know, the number of firefighters that we asked for in there was 12 total, and you know, how we best utilize those systems isn't necessarily strictly written in there. The employees have to be here working in a capacity providing fire suppression work. And so plausibly, it's possible. It's one of the scenarios I played out on, you know, do we add 4 to the trucks? Do we add squads? You know, how do we best leverage those dollars? But then, you know, the budget strategy necessitated bringing a whole nother scenario into that as far as restoring the engine company.
Cool. Got all 7 seconds to spare. Rock and roll. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to be followed by Ryan Moore, but go ahead and start my clock. I want to start with urban renewal and piggyback and follow up on what Councillor Zelenka was asking. So we heard a moment ago that we've hit spending limits in the riverfront. I'm wondering, where are we on downtown spending? In terms of the pre-identified projects we already have? Are we at a point where money coming in is sort of accumulating for future designated projects, or are we also needing all the money that's coming in for the current set of projects?
The current plan for the downtown district, the district is coming to the end of its life this December unless we amend the plan, and council is in the process right now to amend the plan and is considering a proposal to increase the spending limit by $50 million. They'll vote on that in June.
Okay. So that's in flux enough that there's room to potentially play with increasing the base, and then they could still have whatever that conversation looks like. What I was getting at is, would increasing the base further than proposed, like Councilor Zelenka hinted at, would that be something that leaves us without enough to cover current projects, or is it in a realm of plausibility? And it sounds like it's in a realm of plausibility, and it would just adjust the conversation council would then have to have about new spending limits.
One thing I'll add, Ty, if I can jump in here. If the plan is approved as amended at $50 million, changing the frozen base wouldn't change that. The district would still be able to spend $50 million over time. What would happen is it would take you longer to get there. So, we estimated the $50 million would take 19 years. So again, that's based on a number of assumptions and could fluctuate up or down. But if all the assumptions play out and the only difference is the frozen base, it would then take longer than 19 years.
Or they could set a lower spending limit if they wanted to keep if they wanted to try to keep the length the same as it would have been. But that's where flexibility in that conversation.
That's correct. And while we're at, I do want to add one more clarification, if I will, when in the conversation with Councilor Zelenka. I talked about this 2-for-1, that if you want to raise a certain amount of general fund revenue, that the urban renewal district gives up twice that amount. I wanted to just add the reason that is because the other half goes to the other overlapping taxing district. So half of it, whatever frozen base dollars that the district gives up through an increase in the frozen base, half goes to the City of Eugene general fund. The other half gets spread amongst the other taxing districts like the county and 4J and LCC and others.
Okay. And then I guess my other question is on fire, and it's already been touched on by Eliza and Raina. It's about that one graph, the calls versus the stations in FTE. But I guess looking at that with a layman's eyes, I'm seeing call volume has increased like 12 times since 1981 with essentially the same staffing shown. And my question is how? Are there other resources that weren't on the graph that have increased that have allowed us to handle that increased capacity? Or are firefighters 12 times as busy as they were in 1981? Or are there different types? Is there a shift in the makeup of calls, or how?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. A number of things at play. There are FTE that have been added around the ambulance system. Not a large number, but there's some there. Again, like the question answered earlier, a lot of those calls are require suppression companies for first response. But to that, first thing is fire engine location is as much about time and our ability to get the people and the tools, the right tools to the scene within specific travel time. And so those stations locations, when the city was planned back then, were really designed about the ability to get there in a timely fashion. The calls that they were dealing with, some of them took longer. Tools and kind of training and other things have allowed us to not spend as much time or as many resources on those critical structure fire responses. But yeah, it truly is an increased burden and increased mission set that our folks are taking on. And when we look at it and we plan for the future, we're kind of sitting right on that cusp of we're getting it done. Friday was a good example of where, for a brief period of time, we didn't have anybody to respond. And so we're getting close to that edge of reliability. Another example was, an engine from West Eugene responding into Springfield is the closest asset to a car accident with fire. It's challenging. Our crews continue to listen to the radios and make sure they get there and cover those gaps the very best that they can.
Thank you. While we're on that topic, it looked like maybe Councilor Groves did have the answer to Raina's earlier question about the older staffing history.
Yes, unfortunately, I was around clear back then, but it's going back to one of the reasons there were 37 at the time, and I'll go back to 1980, as opposed to the 38 that we have now, is because back in 1980, we had a 2-person, back then it was called rapid attack vehicle, that basically was the same concept of an overloaded pickup. It was neither rapid nor was it capable of mounting much of an attack. In fact, even something as simple as a flue fire they would arrive and have to call for an engine company that had an adult ladder, a 24-foot extension ladder that would actually reach the roof. So basically we ended up doubling up resource, and it would draw from other areas. And that's even more critical now. Even back when I was still with the organization, daily you're just running out of resources. I know police experience that all the time as well, but in fire, mostly what we respond to are in-service emergencies. So I hope I answered Raina's question. Great, thank you.
Looks like it. Thank you very much. Ryan Moore, followed by Ryan Kanofsky.
Hi, thank you. I don't know who this question is for, but in just terms of revenue generation, how does the downtown area stack up to other areas of the city, other neighborhoods?
I think Anne, I wasn't sure if she was going to tell it. You're talking about property tax revenue?
Everything.
Yeah. I think, Anne, do you want to talk about that tax map that shows where the revenue generation comes from across the city? Or I can.
And
you're muted.
You're muted.
Someday we'll learn about the mute button. We did some work a few years ago that mapped out property tax revenue on a per acre basis. And it really clearly shows that the downtown area and north of the university, those are our really strongest performers. They're outperforming other parts of the city by very large ratios. I would be happy to share some of that information with you. We haven't updated it for a couple, maybe 3 years. And it's when you look at it, the downtown district, we tried really hard to do a graphic that showed the downtown district within that map. The downtown district has a really small footprint. It's so small, we couldn't graphically show it in a way that we were ever happy with. We tried circles around and all these things. It's just, it makes up, downtown is much bigger than the district. And so it's a pretty small portion of that. The downtown district does have a lot of public buildings that don't generate tax revenue. So that all of that increment is coming from all the privately owned property.
That makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
It really does. And
Okay.
I know that I have seen that map before. I'd love to see it again. What I'm getting at is, I think, let me rewind a little. I brought up the idea of adjusting the frozen base for the urban renewal districts, I think in the last supplemental process. And I felt like I was kind of laughed out of the room. So I wasn't conveying this clearly, right? I think there's a really big equity piece to all of this, wherein the revenues from the wealthiest district in the city are restricted to that district. And at the same time, we have one of the poorest or all of the poorest areas of the city. So for example, the Bethel branch of the library cutting services, right? That's just inequitous and it bugs me. So a unrelated question, or maybe kind of related, about the riverfront development. So there are 225 new housing units, either planned or under construction. I know there has been talk long ago, I don't remember where it landed. How many of those 225 units are going to be affordable at under 120% AMI?
Those 225 are what's under construction right now. They're coming out of the ground. Neither of those are affordable housing. One of the lots on the north end of the riverfront redevelopment is designated for affordable units, and there'll be 75 affordable units on that parcel.
Okay. Interesting. All right. That's all the questions I have for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan Kanofsky.
Thank you. First couple are for Chief Caven, popular guy tonight. So I'm curious about looking back to, not asking you to look back too far to 1981, but I'm curious about why was ambulance added to fire back then? And is that a common service across all fire districts in Oregon, or is that something that's unique in Eugene?
So yeah, back then there was a private company that was providing the service, and they gave both cities about 12 hours notice to 24 hours notice that they were going to pack up and leave town, and that the city's really had to come to terms with providing that service. And ever since we have, we've taken great pride in that service delivery. And the Lane County Code is pretty tight around that work, and it's based on the experience of having a private for-profit company just leave overnight and have the ability to do so. To answer your question, it's kind of a mixed bag around what fire departments have it or not. The majority of the paid full-time departments in Oregon do transport. We're seeing our large peer departments in the state pick that work up. Maybe not the entire system as we operate it, but they're seeing significant service gaps where they're passing levies to add ambulances to the system, just to reduce response times and increase the unit reliability. And suppression resources are waiting a long time for ambulances to show up. And so our problems aren't necessarily unique as far as how we deploy, but it is again, it's kind of a mixed bag of who transports and who doesn't.
Perfect. And then another question for you, and I'm not going to harp on the same question about the fund graph, but I'm just curious: is the calls for service, is that going to be included in the alternative response study? Is that, because I think we're kind of circling around that in many different parts of our emergency response? Is that the different levels? Is that also going to be included in that kind of future study?
Yeah, so there's some included there. We've been doing that work already in pulling units off of certain call types, reducing the level of response. And so we'll leverage that. We'll also leverage, more importantly, is back to that presentation, is that planning chief, that coordinator for alternative response, will play an important role in helping us reform, again, how we're dispatched, coming up with solutions and funding streams for the 911 prevention work, behavioral health crisis response. So long answer, complicated system. Yes, that will lead to some changes.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the last one is about the urban renewal. I'm just curious, as we're looking at future revenue and talking about compression, are we concerned about any compression edging up against future revenue if we're looking at a TIF increase at all?
So I would say no. So compression has not been an issue for the general government category like it is in education. There is a little bit of room, but as we as we add more levies, for example, so we're haven't calculated it most recently after the new parks levy, but there is a little bit of room there. The thing with compression and urban renewal, most of it is reallocating from other general government, so it stays within the district. There is a very small amount that pulls from the education category, but it's really small. So at this time, not a concern about growing TIF causing any compression in the near term.
Perfect. And just to make sure I'm clear, so including potential future revenue conversations as well, I'm just making sure we're not going to overlap some stuff inadvertently that we're not thinking about.
If future revenue conversations include property tax levies, then yes, it would be a concern or a point of discussion for sure, because there's not a lot of room left before we would start hitting compression.
Perfect. Okay, I appreciate that clarification. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Vinnis, did you have any direct questions that you wanted to ask this time? I'd be happy to invite you to do so.
No, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the invitation, but I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. In that case, let's take our 10-minute break now, and then we can come back for our next round robin. We'll open it up to all the broad conversation that we want to have about the budget as a whole, and we can continue asking any residual questions we still have about today's presentations as well. I'll see you back here at 7:51. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of comments before you go into your rounds, because I wanted to talk a little bit about just sort of the timing and what we're planning on going forward. So part of what we've been wanting to do is hear the presentations, hear your feedback, and really get to understand kind of where the energy of the group is, where your ideas are, kind of where the majority is leaning, so we can understand if you need some alternative solutions, how we would help find some of those ideas. And I will just say we've been thoughtful and careful about not sharing any of those out too quickly, because every one of those potential alternative solutions has humans and services that are impacted by that. And so the things that we've brought forward and the ways that we've crafted this budget was, again, sort of a collective wisdom around how can we actually reduce this budget in a way that protects and maintains an integrity of services across the board. So without really impacting too many people that are in those positions, knowing that all of these services are ones that our team loves, that we know you love and the community loves. So none of it has been easy. So we've wanted to be really thoughtful about, okay, if we're going to start bringing forward other alternatives, we're going to need to talk to some staff ahead of time, because we don't want them to get caught off guard here in these meetings. I will say a couple of things that came up, and I just want to think about approach, because one of the things I've never wanted to do in this position is be defensive and instead really work with you to get to the final solution. And this budget is so complicated, and everything that you pull actually has other implications. So as you start to think, I'm going to need to have a way to say, okay, yes, and these are the implications of that. And I want to do that with sort of an openness and know that that's what the intent is. When we put this budget together, the plan was, we knew, I've always talked about the 15 and the 5, because the 15 million is the number we actually, bare minimum, we needed to reduce by in the biennium. We know now that number's bigger, but that was the number that we were really targeting in the budget. And that, so the things that are included in that 15 are really the things that we identified as being that first set. The 5 was, if we wanted to make a bigger impact on these services, what would we repurpose? So I'm starting to hear some of the like, well, maybe we'll take the repurposed money to fill the other money. And it's not that you can't do that. It's just, we've really tried to keep those separate, because the repurpose is sort of a policy choice. Do you want to make a bigger impact on homelessness, or do you want to keep doing this other thing? So that, I just offer that. We're here to support you going forward, and I look forward to the conversation.
Great, thank you very much. Before we dive into the next round of conversation, just to help guide the conversation, I'll address this again at the end of the meeting, but I want to talk just briefly about the motion structure and how we're actually going to be doing our work next week, because I think at this stage, we've heard all of our presentations that we're going to hear, and at this stage, beginning some of the back and forth conversations that will ultimately be resolved with it by motions that come forward next week is sort of the phase we're at. So we have through this week after this meeting to craft any motions we want. Those need to be to city staff by Monday, no later than Monday morning at 9 a.m. in order for us to have time, and then I'll be working with staff to put that final meeting agenda together. So in order to actually have those in an agenda so that they can go out to the committee ahead in advance of the meeting, that is the deadline that we're working on for preparing motions. And they also need to include at that point a rationale, as well as, of course, what the funding offset is and how we're paying for it. It's not just a motion to do something. So that is sort of the getting those motions crafted for next week is the goal we're ultimately working towards. And so let's try, keeping that in mind should help guide this next round of conversation, I think. So with that, go ahead and start us off, Councilor Groves, to be followed by Zach Mulholland.
Thank you, Chair. And I certainly intend to make some kind of a motion to restore the engine company cut. But I understand Councilor Clark is looking at the same thing, so I'll be very interested in hearing what he has to say and possibly having a discussion. But my thoughts are something around the CSI dollars that are already going to be directed towards the squad concept, which at least shrinks the number down substantially, and see what we can do with that. Along those lines, I'm also concerned about the library, but I'm also, from a public health perspective, I'm also concerned about the Green Hill contract, and if there is some way we can at least restore part of that, especially around spay and neuter, and so we don't have an explosion of even more feral cats and domestic animals that out in the wilds can spread disease and create environmental issues for our community. So those are kind of where my mind is at right now. And again, I also support the library, but the library has grown many times over since going back to 1980 again, where some of our other services have remained extremely flat. So that's kind of where my mind's at. And then I also want to say to our city manager, Sarah Maderi, and our staff, I think you've done a great job of trying to put this together under extremely difficult circumstances. And out of all the budgets I've been a part of or watched over the years, this is by far probably the most complicated and the deepest reaching, which is just a sign of our lack of growing our tax base along with our community. And so we're going to see this problem continuing until we figure a way longer term to work our way out of this. And hopefully along the way, provide some better paying jobs as well. But anyway, nothing I'm saying here should be taken by city staff that I'm upset with you. I know it's tough. My responses to constituents that have contacted me directly is there's no decisions here that we're going to like. I mean, what is going to be the least worst decisions? That's kind of what this comes down to in many ways. And I think it's important for the public to understand that we're going to feel pain no matter what we do. You can't cut this size of money out of our city's budget and not feel the pain. And at the same time, we still have a problem with our unhoused population continuing to grow, and it's going to keep eating bigger pieces of it until we figure out how to get ahead of that. So I'm out of time. Thank you. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Zach, followed by Councilor Keating.
Thanks. A few questions and then a couple of comments if I've got time for them. When we met last week, I asked about the sort of success rate for rehousing of folks coming out of our emergency shelters. It looked like, and I recall it was about 20% are successfully rehoused. In the response to the question in the packet, it looked like the county is supposed to provide the services for those folks in terms of getting them rehoused out of the emergency shelter. Can you speak to that at all? Is that a county responsibility to successfully rehouse those folks, or is there more that we can or should be doing to, successfully rehouse folks in, some type of time frame, like a 90 to 120 day time frame after entry?
Thank you, Zach. I don't believe we have any of our folks that are. Christy could probably jump in then. Thanks, Christy. You got the mute on.
Zach, thank you. I appreciate the question. I think the key there is the case management and navigation services that are associated with the shelters that are operated by the city. And that's the link to getting them into permanent supportive housing or understanding what other sort of housing sources folks might be ready for, or getting them on lists and wait lists to get into housing. And so I think that's the link that the county plays because of their access to available housing that might be suitable for the folks that are in need of that are in the shelters. Happy to provide you more detailed explanation in writing if that would be helpful.
Well, it seems that we are not having success at successfully moving people out of our emergency shelters and into permanent shelter if we're only successfully rehousing 20% of folks. So I'm wondering what more we can or should be doing in this area so that we're actually moving folks through the system to successfully rehouse them and making, opening those emergency spaces up for new people.
I think Peter Chavon last week talked to that continuum of housing, and there isn't enough stock to move people through to different levels of housing. The one program that's extremely successful is our Rest Stop program. We have a higher rate than 20, and I can get you that information. But that particular program does extremely well.
It did look like they're serving a relatively small number of people and had a pretty low number of people that had moved through, even though they'd had a high success rate that those that had moved through. I'd be interested in, learning more about how we can be more successful at how we can improve those numbers, so that we're doing better at getting people onto a track to success, and that they're actually, if they're entering an emergency shelter, there's expectations around, getting a job and rehousing within a reasonable time frame. I'll move on. With regards to my question around fire marshal fees, the hazardous people that are using, companies that are using hazardous chemicals pay a fees to the fire department, but they're pretty small. My understanding is that that only covers the administrative costs of running those fees. Are we allowed to increase those fees, or set by the state at a level we're not allowed to increase them?
So there are certain components of those fees that are part of our master fee schedule, which is under kind of update and review right now. I mentioned that we have a firm working with us on some planning around our overall cost recovery for the multitude of things that the fire department's providing. That will be one of them that they'll explore. But as far as that, I mean, there's a measured approach to the impacts we're putting on the businesses, and can they grow to cover more costs? I just don't know that there's that many of them out there to be appreciable on that front.
Yeah, I'd appreciate knowing how much money we're currently raising from those entities that pay that fee, I think it's 300 entities. And if we are allowed to raise that fee, how much we could raise by raising those fees. Next up on the library, the current service level. If we were trying to restore, I'm about to run out of time. If we were trying to restore current service level when the levy is up for renewal, how much would we have to increase the levy by in order to restore the current service level?
Hey, thanks, Zach, for the question. This is Ben. You know, if we were assuming what we were doing at the start of the strategy session, it would be returning everything except for the outreach team and some of the circulation positions, which are sort of maintained. We typically maintain a little bit of a vacancy inside of that. So increasing that back in with inflation looks like about $4.5 million per year for a levy amount increased to cover those things that we reduced.
Okay, so we just went out to the public just a couple of years ago asking for $2.85 million. That'll be frustrating if we have to go to them in a few years and ask for $4 million more just to get back to the service level they were promised in this last levy. And I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keating, followed by Siobhan Cancel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on my mobile device, so I don't have my notes in front of me because this one needed a emergency walk. I want to applaud applaud, but I want to recognize Zach's comment about the promise made to voters at the last library levy and what we would be asking voters to do in the future. I also want to recognize how intrigued I am about Councillor Clark's concept around the fire department. The motion that I plan on floating before next week's budget meeting will revolve around Green Hill Humane Society. If there are dollars available for ameliorating homelessness throughout our community and recognizing the vital service that Green Hill provides for rehoming or rehabilitating or reconnecting four-legged friends or our furry friends with populations of all incomes throughout the municipality, including the more than 90 in the last calendar year of animals that were connected to an unhoused population. I think you can make a logical connection or a conclusion that that a portion thereof of dollars going toward unhoused services can and should help fill the gap in regards to Green Hill. I'm also keenly interested in exploring some of the pieces around, as mentioned last week, public art installations, downtown activities or extracurricular activities, fun activities that don't cut into personnel, but may be able to be reallocated to help fill a hole. I plan on meeting with staff on Monday, and I've invited Ryan Konofsky to attend, and I look forward to connecting with any budget committee members in the meantime. And so you may get a motion from me on Tuesday by COB but I just want to flag and signal my intent around motions to help fill the hole in regards to Green Hill for four-legged friends. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next up was going to be Siobhan, but she let me know she's having Wi-Fi or signal connection issues right now, so she's gonna go ahead and submit some written questions. And for now, we'll move on to Councillor Zelenka, to be followed by Councillor Semple. Doesn't look like we have Councillor Zelenka popping in, so I'm gonna go ahead. Oh, am I seeing a hand from a? Yeah, go ahead.
Ty, if I can just have a backsies to talk about the library levy. That $4.5 million I gave you includes the 2.85 current of the $1 million levy. So it's a $1.5 million increase, not a $4.5 million increase.
That's an appreciated clarification. Thank you. All right, let's say Councillor Semple, followed by Eliza Kaczynski.
Thank you. I do not have any questions. I'm not bringing any motions, but I'm very interested in what other people are coming up with. I think staff's done a really good job. I know we have these three issues that are really heartfelt and it's difficult. Seeing what could be changed is interesting. I don't know that I would be agreeable to huge changes. Just putting that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Eliza, to be followed by Raina Jackson.
I will say that I too do not plan on bringing any motions, and I too am nervous about some of the changes that I am hearing discussed. One of the things that struck me about the presentation surrounding fire was the last slide that talked about how even if we maintain this level of service, there is still this gap of needs that reflect the fact that our community has grown and we have not grown the resources and the support that is provided. And that's not just a fire issue, that's not just a public safety issue. You see that, I think, throughout the city. And you know, the city manager or other staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is that there is almost no area or no service where the people doing that service and the people receiving that service wouldn't say, I'm struggling, I could do more if I had appropriate resources. It is heartrending to feel like you're trying to serve your community, you're trying to help people in your community, and you're being asked over and over to do more with less. And I think we're asking everybody in the city to do that in one form or another. And so what I'll say is that when we're talking about these changes and these issues that have come to the forefront, what I think about one is the things that are being cut that people in our community value that we have not heard about. And I don't know if we haven't heard about them because people don't value them or because the people who care about them didn't necessarily read the budget or get a press release saying, hey, your thing's getting cut. You should go tell budget that you're unhappy about that. So that's one thing I'm really concerned about. And the other thing that I'm very concerned about is that 8.2 million of, you know, revenue that we'll figure it out by this time next year. And I feel like if we start making a bunch of changes now, these things are all interconnected. There are very in-depth threads here. And I know that the city manager and the staff put a lot of effort into figuring out how to do this in a way that doesn't make the whole thing fall apart and doesn't have as as many unintended consequences. And so, when I look, I don't want to see that $8.2 million grow to be an even bigger gap. And so that's some of where I'm coming from with this, is that I think the gap that we're seeing is a deep structural gap that is much, much larger than is obvious right now. And frankly, I want to focus on how we address that. And I'm out of time. And so I won't say what I want to do instead, and maybe I'll do it in the second round.
Thank you. Raina, followed by Councilor Clark.
I will not be putting forth any motions, but just to clarify, Ty, when you said when people do put forth motions, they should be including not just what they want added back to something, but you're saying what also needs to be included is where that new money is coming from. How deep down the rabbit hole are people expected to go? Because as we've known, everything is intertwined. So if you pull from here, it impacts here. If you pull from there, it impacts there. So I'm just wondering, as the motions are presented, what lens should we really be looking at? Is it one layer deep? Is it 2 layers deep? Because again, there's so many ripple effects that we might not be aware of if we're just going one level deep. Or is that where we rely on city staff to bring forth, well, this is what it really means, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4?
That is precisely why I have been putting even way more extra emphasis this year on working with city staff on your motions than I have in prior years. The previous years that I've chaired this committee, almost all the motions that were made, just their offset was to pull from the reserve for revenue for shortfall. That was the go-to, and that's not available this year as an option. So people are going to have to find, if they want to make a motion, they're going to have to find a more complicated funding source. And so please, anyone who is crafting a motion, work closely with staff on how that source works and make sure they can double check what happens at those second and third layers, like you're talking about, to make sure that it's actually a viable proposal, and that if we pass that motion, which it would be a motion to amend the proposed budget, it needs to leave us with a functional proposed budget after the amendment applies. So that is, and maybe the city manager wants to add a little more on that.
Yeah, I just want to think about, as we kind of get to the end of tonight, when you say work with staff, I want to get really clear about who that is, so we don't have, to Raina's point, if you're reaching out and you're talking to program specific staff, they won't know all of those implications. So I think to the extent we can stay focused with our budget staff and with your exec buddy, we will help coordinate and get all the information and info you need.
I didn't even notice I was dropping the word finance. I meant to be saying finance staff every time I said staff in that sentence. Thank you. Do you have anything else, Raina?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Clark, followed by myself.
Thank you, sir. First and foremost, I want to say I agree with almost all the comments of Councilor Groves, and since he mentioned his interest in the motion I was intending to make, I'd appreciate it if he was willing to work with me and develop this together. I think working with your deep reservoir of knowledge in this area will be really helpful to make sure I don't screw it up. So I'd really like that. Number two, I want to say to Sarah that as it happens, and it's a wonderful, fortunate accident, my exec buddy is the fire chief, so I will work with him and Councilor Groves to make sure that I have everything ready by Monday. I want to say first and foremost that this, in my opinion, this city's first and foremost responsibility is the care for the life and safety of its residents, and police and fire are the most important thing we spend money on, in my opinion. And to the degree that we consider a cut to fire, which hasn't had a significant addition in 40 years, is silly to me. the fact that we don't have 4 guys on every truck as a minimum is in itself almost embarrassing. So a cut is ridiculous in my mind, and we're considering spending money in so many other places that are of less importance and lower priority to the citizens of Eugene. And I think we ought to be clear about something else. I really wish in some ways that Councilor Pryor were still at the table in some ways, and don't take that wrong, Randy. He had a way of making a very significant point about one-time spending versus ongoing funding levels. We made a decision a couple of years ago, and it was fine, and it was a good decision a couple of years ago, to significantly increase what we were spending on emergency support shelters for the homeless to the tune of millions a year. We had one-time federal dollars and one-time state dollars to do it. And we're not talking about how we've turned that into an ongoing expense. And these cuts we're facing are a direct result of not saying, hey, that's the county's job, as Zach mentioned. I agreed with him. This is the county's job, and they can't decide between, Poverty and Homeless Commission and HSC and where all the focus should be. They need to be organized better to do their work. And I think they need to be the lead agency on responding to this issue in a more organized fashion. We can't force them to do that, but we can decide whether we look at what we wish they would do and say, we're going to do more instead or not. And I think that's where our ongoing funding gap lies, and we have to talk about that issue in our policy reaction. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be followed by Ryan Moore. And I really want to echo what Councilor Grove said at the very beginning of this round about the great work that staff did on putting this budget together in the first place. We do have 3 issues that our community has really stepped up and raised to us, and that are all very serious emotional issues. They're all things that I think everyone here deeply cares about as well. Libraries, animals, fire. I mean, these are emotional things. So we're trying very hard to explore all of our options, understand what is and isn't an option, and talking about all sorts of things because we've got these very emotional topics. But at the big picture level, based on what I knew before I saw the proposed budget, having 3 of these is in some ways a gigantic win. I was ready for there to be 6, 8, 10 different issues that we were talking about, all with the same gravity that we're currently discussing these 3. I do think there's a part of that is Eliza's point that perhaps there's a couple others out there that haven't been brought to us by the community at the same level, but that might carry some similar impact if we were talking about them more. But overall, I mean, the fact that there's 3 of them out of a $15 million cut is, for me, a testament to how thoughtfully and carefully this was all put together. That doesn't mean I'm not still interested in continuing to really explore and understand every option possible. And a lot of what I'm going to look at is going to be understanding why things aren't options, not necessarily that I want to in any way second guess the work that ruled them out, but I want to understand why they weren't the piece so that I know not to support them. So definitely for me, the library is a particular highlight out of those 3. All 3 of them are very important issues to me, but I'm still definitely thankful that we're able to have pretty reasonable conversations here with the gigantic gap we are facing. The work that got us to this table, these conversations being where they're at is huge. So I just really want to continually emphasize that point, that there's no criticism of how we got here, just deep appreciation. And then the questions of what to do next and how to handle the fact that there are painful cuts involved when you have to make a cut this deep. So I don't I'll say I don't have any particular specific plans to make any motions, but I'm definitely going to be watching very carefully what's on the table. So Ryan Moore, followed by Ryan Konofsky.
Thank you. And I just want to, as someone who works in government, want to appreciate staff and all the unsung work that is done and how hard it is and how underappreciated it often is. It's hard. Just take a moment to appreciate that. I also want to say on-house services are not the reason we're in a budget crisis right now. That's factually inaccurate. Measures 5 and 50 are the reason we're in a budget crisis. Our inability to keep property taxes increasing at a pace with population growth and our demand on services, that's the reason we're in a budget crisis. I think it's unconscionable to balance this deficit on the backs of people who need help. That's all I'm going to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you. Ryan Konofsky, followed by Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As Councilor Keating mentioned, I'm interested in looking at the seeing what we can do to help the Green Hill cuts. I think that's an important one, as well as the library, but also recognizing the very, very thin tightrope act that city staff had to put together to get us here today. That had a lot of things. So anything that I may work on bringing, my goal would be to be held hold harmless as much as possible. I think this is a very complex budget that may have a couple areas of adjustment, and I'm hopefully looking at a small amount to adjust to help make a couple things whole. Not both of those things in library and animal services, but maybe little bits that we can help do to help keep some very critical services, as we know, that have been raised by our community that we need to keep. For the fire piece, I'm still always very curious, because I think there's it's a service that has two names to it: fire and emergency services, right? And I think that this may be getting at part of that second half of that name in a strategic way. And I think that there's still a lot that we need to understand about our the calls for service that we get, that maybe a big ladder truck isn't necessary at all fender benders, right? And I don't know exactly how that works. I'm not in the system. I will fully state that. But I think that maybe understanding that it is a service that has two pretty distinctly different functions, and how we can balance that, and with budgets that are going to be pretty different for either of the functions. Maybe we understanding what calls for service are, because I still want to make sure what the community is asking for when we are making calls, that we are serving them as well in these services that we're going to be we're required to offer, as Councillor Clark had mentioned, that is our function. So like all of us have said, there's three big issues. There's many more in a tight budget, and I don't envy the staff that got us here today, because I'm sure they all had harder conversations that we had just to get us to this point. So I'll look forward to next week and working with a lot of folks on hopefully getting to a budget that us as a budget committee and as a city can be appreciative of.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
Ty, he had put a note in earlier asking to be put at the very end.
We are at the very end of round one.
Just making sure.
But if he still isn't able to make it back, I think we are going to do a round two, so I can give him another chance when he does make it. Before we do a round two, as always, I do want to invite Mayor Binnis to join our conversation. And I'll ask anyone who wants to participate in round two to please throw those hands up now.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't want to take much time.
Recording stopped.
Oops. That
Recording in progress.
There we go. I appreciated Eliza's comments about not wanting to start pulling on a thread that might unravel other things that we're not can't fully anticipate given how complex this budget is. I also really want to appreciate Ryan's comments. I think when we look at the library, the fire department, and Green Hill, all three are actually providing a huge number of services to the homeless. And so those investments are very tightly connected. And by the chief's own report, it's their capacity to be nimble in response to many of the actions that are a result of just having people who are living unsheltered. We heard this morning about the number of fires. So these are not separate issues, is my point, and they are very much related. And I think it was Councillor Groves who commented about, our job to create a community that's safe and healthy for everyone who lives here, and that includes the people who are unsheltered who are living here. And so I'm just very much appreciating the delicate balance that this budget represents, and very apprehensive about a lot of creating a lot of moving parts in the discussion. But I'm very interested in all of your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm currently seeing 4 hands up. There was also a 5th from Eliza that's gone back down, but either way, round 2, we'll start out with Zach Mulholland, followed by Councillor Keating.
Great. A couple more quick questions. The neighborhood service officers, the 4 permanent and the 4 temporary, have those positions all been hired already?
I'll take a shot at that. There are 4 positions in place now, including a supervisor position as well. And the 4 are pending. We're going through the final kind of classification review with the union before those are posted, but those will be posted soon, the other 4. And those are limited duration, the other 4.
Thank you. With regards to the city's climate work, I know there's a lot of grants that require matching funds. So like there's a Oregon Department of Energy grant. They're offering 75% of the funds to install EV charging stations. How important is it for the city to have matching funds to go after grants like that in the next couple of years as we pursue climate funding?
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Well, having local match is always important when you're going after grants. I will say that we've been able to creatively work with partners, at least on EV charging, to think about how we combine resources to go after grants like that. For instance, we're working in partnership with EWEB and the county to go after a grant where EWEB would be providing the match for the entire grant. So we're partners in the grant, but they're able to bring resources. So I think there's creative ways that we can work on that, depending, again, like how our regional partnerships align towards our common goals.
Thank you. Just some general comments. Very interested in what can be done to expand and support our fire services, potentially including an increase on hazardous material user fees. Very interested in supporting the library to the extent possible so that we are not having to backfill as much in the future to restore current service level, especially restoring the Bethel branch. Literacy person would be a high priority for me. And I would also be supportive of trying to find some increased funding for animal services. However, folks are looking at doing that, whether that's through increased pet licensing fees or looking at some other revenue sources, such as like a tax on veterinary services or other things. Last, I would like us to spend more time and energy looking at our homelessness services and what can be done to improve our responses in these areas. And I'm not sure whether or not I will put forward a motion regarding climate change funding for matching grants or additional homelessness services at this time. But I might hold my tongue for now with the recognition that the Revenue Committee is going to start soon, and hoping that homelessness services and climate work can be a part of that discussion, along with restoring some of these services that we're talking about losing today. So, I really hope that we can concentrate on climate and homelessness and stopping or restoring some of these cuts that we're looking at today. And that's all. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councilor Keating, followed by Eliza.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up what Zach was putting down, the other piece I failed to mention when I indicated I wanted to work with staff on Monday to come up with a motion to fill some, or if not all, of the proposed cuts to Green Hill includes exploring an adjustment to licensing fees for a larger increase for animals that aren't spayed or neutered, and a nominal increase across the board, including felines who, as I understand it, there's no mandate to license cats. And it certainly could be helpful to weave in a licensing mandate for kitties in our community that could allow for them to be more expeditiously reconnected with their families if lost. I'm including microchips in this clunky explanation of my intent, but I didn't want budget committee members to be surprised if there's a licensing component to the aforementioned plan to help fill a significant hole that's being proposed to be cut to Green Hill. Thank you, members. And I want to also underscore and appreciate staff. I really want to commend Ryan Moore for articulating it better than I am right now. My deep appreciation for the work across the board that staff has done and continues to do. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you. Eliza, followed by Councilor Clark.
So I guess in response to the last two comments, just as sort of a clarifying point, when we're talking about figuring out how we would pay for something, my impression is that almost all revenue sources, we can't just say we're going to get more money from X in the budget unless there's some sort of basis to believe that that's actually going to happen. Like, I couldn't say we're going to get money from a mandatory cat licensing fee until council has actually voted on whether they want to have a mandatory cat licensing fee. Is that correct?
I think it would be challenging to count on that starting on July 1. So we would just have to explore, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Councilor Keating about that idea, so I'll know more after I do.
If it's helpful for anyone, I actually asked a bunch of questions about animal licensing and staff helpfully answered them in that packet. So for anyone who's curious, thanks staff for answering all my questions about pet licensing. The other thing I wanted to second Ryan Moore's comments about some of the sources for our funding challenges, because it's not just us, and it's not just because we have chosen to respond to this in the way that we have. And I want to say that to a large degree, where I see much of our homeless and unhoused response being is reducing impacts both to people who are unhoused and to other community members. I work downtown, I walk to work, I see every day what the people with the power washers are power washing off the sidewalk. And not having, and that is bad now, and that's bad now with the resources that we're providing. And if we say we're not going to provide that kind of support anymore, what we're going to end up having to do is pay more money for power washing. And I would rather try and tackle things head on than try and play cleanup after there's already a disaster to the degree that we can. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Clark, and then myself.
Thank you, Chair. I too want to tackle things head on, and I appreciate Eliza's point, and I appreciate my friend Ryan Moore for for chiming in on that too. But I wanted to be clear about facts. And Sarah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but maybe you can clarify for me because I don't know whether it's annual or biannual. When I say we're spending, or our plan includes an expenditure next year of $6 to $7 million more than we spent 2 years ago, 3 years ago, prior to the pandemic on homeless services. Am I correct in saying that?
You're pretty close, and I don't know if Christy has those numbers. I'd have to jump right in to pull those numbers right up.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, we have been investing more year over year in that, and Eliza's also correct. A number of that is around impacts to the community.
My larger point, and I'm sorry, Christy, for cutting you off there without having a chance to jump in. My larger point is we're spending millions more, 6 or 7 millions a year. We're facing a $10 million hole. So obviously there are other places where this comes from. And I don't want to balance a budget on the backs of anybody, but it's a simple fact that we decided that with one-time money, we would respond to it by adding millions a year in a response with a policy that I believe is failing. And I believe objectively true, it's failing. The problem is getting worse, not better. I believe that most community members would agree with me on that point. And I'm simply saying it's not one of our primary functions to respond. The question of should we do more is a reasonable question. And I think we should have that debate at council or at budget. But we're not having it. And that was my larger point. We're not having the question, the discussion, should we increase by millions a year our response to homelessness in the manner we're doing it and not working, rather than different conversation with the county whose job it is to respond, and at the same time cut primary responsibilities of the city like fire and the library and animal services. I think that's a policy discussion that's absolutely right for this body. And I'm not trying, again, to balance the budget on anyone's back, but we're making a policy decision to spend millions more on a policy that I question whether or not it's working. And while we're making cuts to primary services, and I think that's a mistake, and I think the community would agree with me if we pulled that question. So thank you.
Thank you. That was interesting. I think it wasn't the topic I was going to talk about, but it raised a lot of thoughts, and I think now I am. I want to say I don't agree with your characterization that because it's increasing year over year, it's necessarily a failing policy. There is something that analysis ignores, which is what is causing homelessness counts to increase in the first place. The comparison that would ultimately determine if it's succeeding or failing is the difference between what we're seeing with the policies in place versus what we'd see without them, which is unfortunately a hypothetical that we can't definitively answer. But being worse than last year could still be a policy win if it would have been this much worse than last year without the policy, and instead it's this much worse. So just in framing that viewpoint, there's not a clear way to actually answer it, but I want to emphasize that what would have happened is really the comparison point, not necessarily what happened last year, because that's something that communities across the country, really, and especially across the West Coast, are seeing these year-over-year increases in their challenges with the unhoused populations growing, and all the various impacts that has on the safety of people who don't have housing, the impacts on the broader community for people who are housed as well, all of that folded together. That's increasing for everyone. And across that list of everyone, a whole lot of different strategies have been tried. Ours is one of them. So is it working or not? It's not, I don't think you can just automatically dismiss it as working for that reason. It's more complicated than that. And I, for one, am glad that to be in a community where our policy approach is to try to focus first on the people who are experiencing a lack of housing and trying to relieve some of that fundamental desperation that's in the system right now. And I believe that investing money and trying to relieve that desperation is the best thing we can do in terms of long-term impacts. And that doesn't change that we're also seeing all sorts of other economic and housing impacts that are driving these increases. But I think that it's working as well as it can in a very difficult situation. And the reason we're seeing year-over-year increases is we're swimming upstream, not that we're using the wrong kind of boat. With 9 seconds left, what I was going to say was about the reason I'm wanting to, I think it's good that we're going to see some motions, but I think I will stick with this point instead. And it looks like Ryan Moore wants a second round now as well.
Really fast, please. And I, for one, want to go to bed, as do many others. I appreciate what Councilor Clark's getting at. I think we're also not talking enough about upstream solutions and looking at who is becoming homeless and focusing there rather than on response, doing things like camp cleanup. If we were doing more things like, and this isn't exactly the city's responsibility, but rent assistance, I would argue most of our unhoused people are coming from the renter population here. Anyway, that's all.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Looks like that. I want to toss one more time to Councilor Zelenka just in case he's got a chance to chime in, because we haven't had an opportunity to hear from him yet. But going once, going twice, wrap up. I think that I really appreciate all the discussion tonight. I appreciate all the conversations. And I'm looking forward very much to seeing what motions are proposed. I'll be meeting with staff on Monday to put together an agenda for our final meeting next Wednesday. That meeting will include a public comment period again. And after public comment, we'll dive right into deliberation, with people making whatever motions they have to potentially amend the budget. We'll deal with each motion one by one. And at the end of all of those motions, we'll go ahead and move to the final step of a motion to approve the budget and send it on to council for their deliberation. So that is the steps we're in. Once again, for everyone working on those motions, work with finance staff to make sure you've got something valid, include rationales and funding sources, and make sure that you have finance staff's confirmation that you're using viable funding sources and that what you're proposing holds up. If at all possible, please get those in Monday at 9 a.m. And so that when I have my meeting with staff, we already know what motions there are as we build that agenda. It's much harder on us if we have to work something in after the fact, so we will do what we have to do to allow everyone to make the motions they need to. And that is where we're at. So I think we can all go home and be home maybe in this case, but get a little bit of rest and then get to those of us that are going to make motions. I think I have a lot of work to do, so good luck. And I'm very interested to see what we end up with. But for now, at 8:47 p.m., this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your work.